These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps Hair Loss Treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code Tom.
We say fight back!
Our selection today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is This Land, How Cowboys, Capitalism, and Corruption Are Ruining the American West by Christopher Ketchum. This is from Chapter 1. It's about halfway through the chapter. He's talking about Bernard DeVoto. DeVoto was the first major historian of the West who was also an environmentalist and an activist, the first chronicler of what Wallace Stenger called the West's curious desire to rape itself. DeVoto was a Westerner raised in Utah. He suffered in the provincialism and intolerance of Mormon country, went east to study, and then teach at Harvard, settled in Cambridge, but never forgot the beauty of his native ground. Loving the land and history, said a magazine profile, but loathing the society. His histories, novels, criticism, his essays in Harper's Magazine were for 20 years, where for 20 years he wrote the oldest column in American journalism, Easy Chair, pointed always west. His trilogy, published in the 1940s, The Year of Decision, Across the Wide Missouri, and The Course of Empire, garnered the Pulitzer, the Bancroft, and the National Book Award. Widely celebrated, DeVoto used his position to become his generation's most outspoken defender of the public lands. He called the West a plundered province, a resource colony for corporations and absentee landlords who practiced, quote, an economy of liquidation. He was broad in his assault on the liquidators. He went after the timbermen, the mining companies, the stockmen, the cattle barons, the oilmen and gasmen, the overgrazers, the deforesters, the denuders, the profiteers of gold rushes and grass rushes. He named the bankers and congressmen who abetted the plundering, the Western hogs, he called them. They've been busy for a century laying waste to the West. Long before the public domain was vested with any permanence legally in the hands of the American people, before there was a consideration of the land itself or any environmental ethic, the West had been torn up, beaten down, subjected to the greed and profligacy of the commodity users. Ironically, the users, in their race to liquidate, helped drive the creation of the public land system we know today, as they proved the need for federal stewardship to stop their abuses. Massive timber frauds in the 19th century, the largest land frauds seen in the West, led directly to the establishment of the Forest Service in the 20th century, its purpose to stop deforestation. Out-of-control cattle numbers in the steppe, overgrazing that turned the fragile soil to dust, led directly to the federal grazing regulatory system that eventually became the BLM. When in 1946 the commodity users conspired to destroy the public land system, the system in which DeVoto saw the only hope for Western conservation and preservation, he stood to oppose them. Quote, he was the first conservationist in nearly half a century, except for Franklin D. Roosevelt, to command a national audience, said Arthur Schlesinger Jr., a student of his at Harvard. No one did more in the post-war years to rouse public opinion against the spoilers than DeVoto. DeVoto and Schlesinger had seen firsthand what unregulated industry could wreak in the arid lands when they drove cross-country together in the spring of 1940 and entered western Kansas past the 100th meridian. These were the last years of the Dust Bowl before FDR's soil conservation programs and the return rains of the 40s could heal the land. Wrote DeVoto, a cemetery was 10 inches deep in sand. Half the headstones had toppled into it and been partly covered. Sagging shacks that had been farmhouses had their windows blown out, and dust was 2 or 4 or 6 feet deep against their western walls and a foot deep against the far wall. A repulsive dust as fine as sifted flour. Now, 6 years after that trip with Schlesinger, DeVoto was confronted with the West's cattle barons, the liquidators of the grass, who were hell-bent on reducing the region to the same mess of dust. In 1946, the Joint Committee on Public Lands of the American National Livestock Association met in Salt Lake City to discuss the goal of undermining what few regulations had been placed on livestock operators under the newly formed Bureau of Land Management. The stock growers' ambition went further than mere deregulation. They hatched a plan with the help of friends in Congress to begin moving all federal land, the BLM and Forest Service domain, as well as the national parks, into the control of the states. The plan evolved through 1946, 47, 48, with legislation making its way on Capitol Hill. DeVoto covered the story for Harper's. He cautioned that the stock growers were attempting, quote, one of the biggest land grabs in American history. The public lands are first to be transferred to the states on the wholly justified assumption that there should be a state government not wholly compliant to the desires of stock growers. It could be pressured into compliance, he wrote in Harper's. Nothing in history suggests the states are adequate to protect their own resources, or even want to, or suggests that cattlemen and sheepmen are capable of regulating themselves even for their own benefit, still less the public's, end quote. The long-term plan, he said, was to get rid of the public lands altogether, to place the common possession of the American people into private hands. The livestock industry went on the attack, mounted a PR campaign to discredit DeVoto, and pressured Harper's to cease its support. Unmoved, the magazine continued for 3 years to publish his relentless exposés of the intrigues in the state houses and in the Western Caucus. DeVoto had convinced the editors, when no other publication that mattered in the East cared, that the threat of such land transfer was an existential one. This Land by Christopher Ketchum.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, happy Midwoche Wednesday. It's the middle of the week. And in our third hour, by the way, Jeff Cohen is going to be here with us, the co-founder of, or the founder of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, the co-founder of Roots Action, a coalition, a group of folks who were big Bernie supporters, and some were even Jill Stein supporters, have come together and said, that's it. We've got to get Trump out of here. We are going to support Biden full on, full-throated. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. We'll get to that in 2 hours. But it being Wednesday and the first hour, it is time for Middays with Mark. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the big cheese progressive in Washington, D.C. It should be okay. Is on the line with us. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay, we lost our audio for a second. Congressman Mark Pocan, the big cheese progressive from Wisconsin, is and co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is with us for the hour, taking your calls at 202-808-9925. And Congressman Pocan, welcome back. Where are you, and what's at the top of your list today?
Wisconsin, because we're right now, trying to finalize the COVID bill, and then we'll be, back in D.C. But otherwise, this is the August district period that we traditionally have, and we just finished a ton of stuff. I was out in D.C. for like 5 weeks in a row. I guess we just kind of figured. But what my mind is on is really kind of COVID, and maybe a little on the election. It's also we've got to get this package done. Too many people are hurting without that extension of unemployment benefits. We need to support our state and local governments that are providing services. We need to support our frontline workers, and I know Nancy Pelosi has been fighting very hard, along with Chuck Schumer, for all those things as the negotiations proceed.
It seems to me that this coronavirus, in a way, I hate to call it a blessing in disguise, because that, it's just devastating people's lives. We've got 25 million people, unemployed, and many of them on the edge of homelessness, and just, it's just ripping our country. And yet what it has done, when you compare how the United States is responding to this, and I'm not talking about Trump's incompetent medical response to the virus, but if you look at Canada, if you look at Europe, they're not experiencing huge problems with widespread homelessness. They're not experiencing problems with unemployment rates going above 10%, because in part, or in large part, because they have strong social safety nets. You have free college education in all these countries, so you don't have young people struggling with student debt. You've got heavy unionization, so workers are backstopped. You've got a government that has a strong tradition of social safety nets, and so it's directly supporting individuals rather than running everything through banksters and big corporations. And you've got a national health care system in each one of these countries. It seems to me, Congressman, that this moment is awakening a lot of Americans to the core humanity and practicality of the progressive message. And I'm wondering if you share that perspective, and how Democrats, and in particular progressives in the Democratic Party, can leverage this moment into true transformation of this country in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Tom. In fact, just use Medicare for All as an example. We could already see the movement in the polling, people understanding why we need to make sure that everyone would have access to health care, and it shouldn't matter how you've gotten this disease, that you need to have support. And, while we did cover testing for people, there's still a lot of other expenses and long-term expenses people are going to have related to healthcare. And it's really helped us to make the case, why are we the only industrialized nation that doesn't have universal healthcare? Just that issue alone, we're really seeing the progress. And in so many other areas, we can make the argument how other countries did it better because they had different policies in place. So it really is that kind of a moment. And I think especially, with hopefully Joe Biden winning in November and maybe flipping the Senate and having the House, then it's incumbent we do something with it, right? Not just talk, but actually do something about all those issues.
Yeah, amen. Well, Joyce has got a bunch of callers set up, ready to go, so let's just jump right on it. Deborah in Grand Rapids, Michigan, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, fellas. Yesterday, Tom, you kind of ended the show with the Jared Kushner and Trump decision to not test and trace as a political policy. And I was wondering if either you or the congressman knows that, or how, if you know anything about, I view that as negligent homicide myself. And I was wondering if there, in the future, can be any way that these people can be charged, or, is there some legal ramifications that could be done for their negligent homicide actions?
Yeah, Deborah, I'll tell you, I use those words myself, and I know those are pretty strong words to use, but I truly believe that the president's not like he didn't have the information, because we've heard it from Dr. Fauci and so many others, and yet he just chose not to act, whether it be not initially using the testing that was available worldwide, to not getting it out quick enough, to not providing the resources we need, as you mentioned, for contact tracers and others that can stop the spread, for not getting everything we can to get PPEs and reagents so you can run tests. That's one of the items you need to actually be able to process tests done in time. Everything he's done, I wish negligence was the least word I can use, but I think it was almost malicious too. Even on masks, I think he sees, every time he sees a mask, he sees a symbol of what he did wrong, and that's why he's been so strongly against mask wearing, when we know it's the one logical, doesn't matter if you're the farthest right conservative, the most left-leaning progressive, that's one thing we should all be for, because it helps to reduce people getting COVID, and yet we've had a problem getting that done in this country. The second part of your question is going to be difficult. I don't see how we actually find a way to charge him with all of this, but hopefully what comes out of this is, one, he's not reelected, and two, we learn how as a nation to act differently and cover issues like this differently.
Mitch in Madison, Wisconsin, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We got a minute and a half to the break.
Hello, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on. Congressman, my question is, I run a small business in Madison, and we were breaking even and turning a profit earlier this year, but since COVID hit, we've had to close our doors. And my family's having to sell our house to pay back our business loan. Is there any steps Congress is taking to make whole the people who are losing everything because of this?
Yeah, first of all, let me just express, I'm sorry, Mitch, so many restaurants, bars, meeting industry, tourism, go down the list of businesses that are impacted. There have been some support, efforts out there with PPP and some loans, and we're hoping that there'll be something in this next package again that addresses small businesses. Because as you may know, since you live in my district, Mitch, I'm a small business owner myself of a specialty printing business. That we have something to help folks. The tough part is, once if you've had a folded business, I don't know if there's anything I've seen in packages to help folks there. Just the same reason we're trying to have eviction protections and other things, because after the fact you've lost the home, I don't think there's as many things as you can do. And this is part of what happens when you have a once-in-a-century pandemic and you have a government that didn't respond correctly and didn't deal with this in a way like we've seen so many other countries. So, Mitch, I wish I had a better answer for you. I would recommend you reach out to my office since you do live in my district, and we can try to help you identify any resources that are out there, but it's going to be difficult.
It's a tough time. It's a tough and scary time. It's 15 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the big cheese progressive in Washington, D.C., although he's from Wisconsin, is with us for the hour, middays with Mark, taking your calls. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Margaret in Enumclaw, Washington. I'm here with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom, thank you for everything you do. And Congressman Pocan, I was curious. The first time in my life I've ever taken my ballot to an actual ballot box was yesterday, because I wanted to do everything I could to bypass Trump's mail system. I'm curious, is there a way that somewhere it has to start, and I'm trying to tell everybody I can, and I'm putting a little ad in the paper if I have to under, in the columns about, please, when you vote this November, take your ballot to an official ballot box instead of putting it in the mail. It was like the place was an absolute parking lot, but everyone was cooperating with each other, and I never saw a line so long. Bread lines had nothing on people waiting to get their ballots into this steel box in front of the library in Enumclaw. And I was curious, is there a way that as a congressional group you can get it out to your people that are constantly in touch to spread it around that this November bypass the mail system and put your ballot into a box instead of a mail box? Put it in an official ballot box.
Yeah, and let me add to that, Congressman. Today in Portland, we've got 3 of, I don't know how many total postal, main systems there are in Portland, but 3 of them are running right now these new rules that Trump's Postmaster General, the guy who made a $2 million contribution to his campaign, put into place. And at one of those 3 locations, the postal workers today are basically going to be picketing because they say it's intentionally slowing down the mail here in Portland.
Yeah. So I mean, so Margaret, first of all, elections are run slightly different in localities and states. In Wisconsin, we don't have a place you can just drop that ballot off. You have to either go into the polling place on Election Day, and then you've kind of defeated the purpose of why we have mail-in. So I think this is the way I would recommend it. Since we know that absentee ballot generally, if they've asked for it early enough, goes out 6 or 7 weeks before the election. When they get it, fill it out right away. And you can mail it, and even if it's delayed a little bit, you still have plenty of time, and you can often verify that it's been received. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend people wait until Election Day to turn it in. And while maybe Washington has a box you can leave it in, and that would be a good solution, and certainly people should do that where they can, that's not going to happen everywhere. So I would just recommend when you get your ballot, fill it out as quickly as possible and make sure it gets in, because that way you've got enough extra time to make sure that you know it'll get counted.
There you go. Morris in Long Beach, California, listening on KPFK. You're on the air. Oh, 20 seconds. I'm sorry. Morris, I'm going to put you on hold here. I missed my time cue. We just have 20 seconds, Congressman. Do you think that the Congress is going to be able to do something about the post office? Can you stop?
The president is really fighting hard against us trying to get the funding there. So I don't know if it's just about the election, if it's just about his fight with Bezos, if it's just about privatizing, but this is something he is fighting really hard on in negotiation.
Yeah. Well, he's fighting for his life. He wants to stay out of prison.
Exactly.
We'll be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Stick around. We'll be right back. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. 9 years before the oligarchs of the South declared war against the North because they wanted to preserve slavery. In fact, they wanted to impose slavery in the North. Many of these guys that these monuments have been built to just came right out and said it. 9 years before that began, Frederick Douglass gave a speech saying, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" A good and important question. It continues to be a question because slavery is still legal in the United States. The 13th Amendment said that slavery can only exist under the color of law. If somebody is charged or convicted of a crime, then they can be held as a slave. And it's still going on in the United States. In fact, it's the main reason why we have more prisoners than any other country in the world, free labor. And then on top of that, we find that the police departments that get more 1033 equipment, they kill more people. Check it out at thomhartmann.com. Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And Morris in Long Beach, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Congressman, the big blue wave is here, but that's not why I called. Congressman, would you be interested in a web page that would help us reopen schools, churches, and businesses? There are new technologies now to help us combat this lethal aerosol pathogens. They're called portable air purifiers. Would you be interested in that webpage?
Yeah, Boris, I've heard of this. I still think someone has to be able to buy them, and we have to make sure that they're actually working to the full efficiency and all the rest. I think we're going to, unfortunately, for the schools that opened early in the South, we're going to learn from their experience and see how it's going to work for the rest of the country. And I know that there's a lot of strong feelings on this issue that we are able to reopen, but we've got to do whatever we do safely. And I think we're probably going to learn from watching some of these school districts. Don't forget, right now, there's a lot of open air and things like that at the school districts. And as we move closer to fall and winter, that's going to change. So this is something I wish it was a simple answer as a website, Morris. It's not. But I do appreciate what you're trying to say, that we should find a technology that would provide people that safety.
Karen in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. Hi, Tom. I received a economic disaster relief loan, and I had in March, and I had gotten a small portion of what they had said. And then a month ago, I got a email that says that please finish your application. So I did that. And then they deposited the rest of the money into my bank. And the very next day, I got an email from Donald Trump asking for a donation. And I want to know how he got my email.
Yeah,
illegal?
I don't. Yeah, I don't think there's a connection, though, Karen, because he can't get our official emails like that for the campaign. However, I think all campaigns right now are in acquiring email mode. And, he acquired some list that you were on. It just happened to be a day apart. I'm glad you got the money. I thought it was an issue around that. And I was going to say, please reach out to your member of Congress because, you need some assistance to get that. But if it's just the email, I'm guessing it was just a coincidence because it would be very difficult for the Trump campaign to get something like that, especially the turnaround in which it happened. So I think you can rest assured that there's not a pipeline from the government going to Donald Trump's campaign.
Ruth in Maple Grove, Minnesota. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello. My Democratic congressman, along with 29 other Democrats and 30 Republicans, signed a letter to Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy about the Trust Act, encouraging that to happen. And I'm not sure I understand it completely, but it sounded like it shortened the time for Congress to make any changes to Social Security, Medicare, and something to do with the Highway Trust. And that just seemed like an odd combination. And I want to have you explain if you know anything about the Trust Act.
Yeah, Ruth, I don't. There's like 8,000 bills that are introduced, and I do not know 8,000 bills off the top of my head. My guess is how you explained it. It sounds like it might be an initiative from the problem solvers, because if it's an even number of Dems and Republicans, that sounds like the things they do. I just don't know enough about it. So I would say, do a Google on it and see if there's a group that you trust that's talking about it and try to get the background. But I do not know offhand. Like I said, there's 8,000.
Social Security Works is warning that it sets up Social Security for privatization. So,
which is why when it had an even number of each, it sounded like the problem solvers. And generally, I find the problem solvers are the problems themselves, not the individuals, but the organization. It's a group that got a lot of funding from, if I can just real quick, Tom, on this, to explain how Washington organizations work. I originally joined it. It was supposed to be about people trying to work across party aisles. Of course, we need to do that in government. As a member, a number of things didn't pass the smell test, and that's generally how I operate. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a pretty average guy, and that's how I think and work. And in doing so, I reached out to the organization, the Problem Solver organization, and asked who their funders were, because it seemed to be a little skewed corporate. And they told me they would quietly take my name off the membership list. And I said, well, no, that's not what I asked for. I asked for who your funders are. Whenever someone won't share that with you, right off the bat, I've got some questions about the organization. So I trust Social Security Works. If they say something, they're probably right. And you might just want to, check what Social Security Works is saying about that legislation.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward stuff. 30 seconds to the break, Congressman. There are multiple attempts to privatize Social Security. We had Stephen Moore on this show yesterday, the president's economic advisor, telling us that we need to do away with the payroll tax. Social Security needs to be funded out of the general fund. Are you guys going to be able to fight this back?
Yeah, even you remember the president wants to cut the payroll tax, and there's no appetite even among Republicans on this. House Dems are rock hard on Social Security protection, and in fact, a majority of us want to expand it. So I think we're safe.
Okay, good. That's reassuring, because Stephen Moore sounded quite confident. Okay, we'll be back with more of your calls, your questions for Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, representing the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. Pocan.house.gov is his website.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Back with your calls in just a moment. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Defying Hitler by Sebastian Haffner, a memoir. This is from chapter 17, about a little more than a third of the way into the book. At first, the revolution only gave the impression of being an historical event like any other, a matter for the press that might just possibly have some effect on the public mood. The Nazis celebrate January 30th as their day of revolution. They are wrong. There was no revolution on January 30th, 1933, just a change of government. Hitler became chancellor, by no means the Führer of the Nazi regime. The cabinet contained only 2 Nazis apart from him. He swore an oath of allegiance to the Weimar Constitution. The general opinion was that it was not the Nazis who had won, but the bourgeois parties of the right, who had captured, in quotes, the Nazis and held all the key positions in the government. In constitutional terms, events had taken a much more conventional, unrevolutionary course than most of what had happened during the previous 6 months. Outwardly also, the day had no revolutionary aspects, unless one considers a Nazi torchlight procession through Wilhelmstrasse or a minor gunfight in the suburbs that night as signs of a revolution. For most of us outsiders, the experience of January 30th, 1933 was that of reading the papers and the emotions we felt while we were doing so. The morning headline was, "Hitler called to president." That produced a certain nervous, impotent irritation. Hitler had been called to the president in August and November. He had been offered the vice chancellorship and then the chancellorship. Both times he had set impossible conditions, and both times there had been solemn declarations, "Never again." Each time, "never again" had lasted exactly 3 months. Hitler's opponents in Germany at that time suffered from a compulsive urge to offer him everything he wanted, indefatigably, and at an even cheaper price. Indeed, to press it upon him. It's the same now with his opponents outside Germany. Again and again, this appeasement was formally renounced, and again it gaily reappeared at the crucial moment. Just so today. Then, as now, one's only hope was Hitler's own unreasonableness. Would it not sooner or later exhaust the patience of his opponents? Then, as now, it became apparent that their patience knew no bounds. At midday, the headline said, "Hitler makes impossible demands." We nodded, half reassured. It was only too credible. It would have gone against his nature to ask for less than too much. Perhaps the cup had once more passed from us. Hitler, the last defense against Hitler. At about 5 o'clock, the evening papers arrived. Cabinet of National Unity formed Hitler Reichschancellor. I don't know what the general reaction was. For about a minute, mine was completely correct. Icy horror. Certainly this had been a possibility for a long time. You had to reckon with it. Nevertheless, it was so bizarre, so incredible to read it now in black and white. Hitler, Reichschancellor. For a moment, I physically sensed the man's odor of blood and filth, the nauseating approach of a man-eating animal, its foul, sharp claws in my face. Then I shook the sensation off, tried to smile, started to consider, and found many reasons for reassurance. That evening, I discussed the prospects of the new government with my father. We agreed it had a good chance of doing a lot of damage, but not much chance of surviving very long. A deeply reactionary government with Hitler as its mouthpiece. Apart from this, it did not really differ much from the 2 governments that had succeeded Brüning's. Even with the Nazis, it would not have a majority in the Reichstag. Of course, that could always be dissolved, but the government had a clear majority of the population against it, in particular the working class, which would probably go communist now that the Social Democrats had completely discredited themselves. One could prohibit the communists, but that would only make them more dangerous. In the meantime, the government would be likely to implement reactionary social and cultural measures with some anti-Semitic additions to please Hitler. That would not attract any of its opponents to its side. Foreign policy would probably be a matter of banging the table. There might be an attempt to rearm. That would automatically add the outside world to the 60% of the home population who were against the Hitler government. Besides, who were the people who had suddenly started voting Nazi in the last 3 years? Misguided ignoramuses, for the most part, victims of propaganda, a fluctuating mass that would fall apart at the first disappointment. No, all things considered, this government was not a cause for alarm. The only question was what would come after it. It was possible that they would drive the country to civil war. The communists were capable of going on the attack before a prohibition against them came into force. The next day, this turned out to be the general opinion of the intelligent press. It is curious how plausible an argument it is, even today, when we know what came next? How could things turn out so completely different? Perhaps it was just because we were all so certain that they could not do so and relied on that with far too much confidence. So we neglected to consider that it might, if worse came to worse, be necessary to prevent the disaster from happening. Through the whole of February 1933, everything that happened remained a matter for the press. In other words, it took place in an arena that would lose all reality for 99% of the population the moment there were no newspapers. Admittedly, enough occurred in that arena. The Reichstag was dissolved, then in a flagrant breach of the Constitution, Hindenburg also dissolved the Prussian regional parliament. There were fast and furious changes of personnel in the civil service. The book Defying Hitler.
In this week's Science Revolution, will the virus stop the Trump cult the way defeat in World War II stopped the fascist cult? Dr. Michael Mann is with us on how the Trump administration boosts deregulation by undervaluing the impacts of climate change. Tony Corvo drops by about a new rule. Americans are now eating chickens with cancer. Ew, is that healthy? He'll let you know. Jenny Harbine tells us about a new lawsuit to stop Trump from handing public land to coal companies. Plus geeky science. School openings? Well, studies now show young kids could spread COVID-19 as easily as older children and adults. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Welcome back. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. Our Middays with Mark segment here. Bernard in Westfield, Wisconsin. Boy, Congressman, you really bring out the Wisconsin callers. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman.
Hi, Bernard.
I'm here in Westfield, Wisconsin. Well, not in Westfield, Wisconsin. I can't even see my nearest neighbor. I'm so far out of town. But a lot has been made of the lack of high-speed internet in this country, especially with schools closing. I think you need to possibly pay a visit to Marquette County and find out how a local telephone cooperative could provide its customers with gigabit internet connections and fiber optics here in the middle of nowhere. It could be a model for the rest of the nation, you know. And that's about all I have to say on it.
Thank you, Bernard.
I hear you, Bernard. You know, I live in a rural town of 823 people, and until 2 years ago didn't have broadband. So I certainly have experienced what you are and what many people across the country and certainly across Wisconsin are experiencing. I started a rural broadband caucus, a bipartisan one, and everyone wanted to be a co-chair. So we have 3 co-chairs on the Democratic side, 3 on the Republican side, and we stopped making co-chairs, but everyone understands the issue. The problem is a couple things. One, it takes money. And we actually did that in our infrastructure package that the House Dems put out there. Jim Clyburn, our Democratic whip, chaired that commission, and we know we've got to invest a lot of money in that. But 2, there's states like Wisconsin. The problem is, you know, under people like Scott Walker when they were governor, didn't allow a little town like mine to be able to form a co-op or to buy from a neighboring community. We had to wait till that big telecom company decided to grace us with their expansion, and usually they'd only do it when they got free money. So there's some challenges at the local levels we need to get around. We've introduced legislation to deal with some of that, and but you're right. I mean, especially now with COVID, I think everyone realizes the importance of having internet connections, and it's not just in those rural areas. Let's also remember in urban centers, there's also some issues, and we need to address those because to me, having the internet these days is no different than having electricity. You have to have it to exist.
Marilyn in Madison, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm lucky enough to live in Madison where it's easy to vote. But I was contemplating the problem with drop boxes for absentee ballots. Why can't these be dropped at the public library that our Republican legislature has been okay with, like public librarians to register people to vote I know that for years I voted absentee at or voted early at my public library. Why, if librarians are entrusted with these activities, why can't there be drop boxes where you could go in and hand your absentee ballot to a librarian?
Yeah, in Maryland, I think that's a great suggestion, especially if you made it a box that, somehow Republicans couldn't say is something you could tamper with. You can, though, still drop it off at the city hall or my town hall or anything like that. Because the person earlier in the program, mentioned about in Washington State, they've got this pretty prevalent. But I still think, and I want to make sure people have confidence, Donald Trump is trying to break confidence in the Postal Service. I still get all my mail and packages, and even with his rules that'll slow things down, they're going to slow things down days and maybe a week. If you wait until a week before the election to mail it, then you're going to have to drop it off somewhere. But if you get that ballot 6 weeks out, which is when they send them, I think in Wisconsin, and I believe it's 6 weeks out, as long as you fill it out that first week or two, you're giving it a month to show up. It will show up. So I have confidence still in mail-in ballots. We just need to be proactive enough to do it early. And if we wait a little too long, then we're going to have to drop it off at the city hall. But Marilyn, your suggestion is a good sound one.
J.H. in New Haven, Connecticut. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Okay, I'm going to put J.H. on hold. Whenever people say, can you hear me? That's a bad sign. Jim in Voorheesville, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Congressman Pocan, I have a question, and it's a deep concern of mine. Donald Trump has been all along, I believe, setting up his dominoes to usurp the election in the fall. And by setting up his dominoes, I mean the COVID virus, his lack of any action on that, and what will be a resurgence or a surge of the virus in the fall, giving him the opportunity to declare a national state of emergency and nationalize the National Guard, and then here goes the election. Donald Trump is a devious and evil person, and I do not put this beyond him. And I'm wondering if Congress or any members of Congress are looking at the possibility of him doing this and what can be done to prevent him.
Yeah, so Jim, people ask this every week, so I understand the concern out there, and certainly people are looking at every possible scenario. I was happy, though, to see when the president tweeted out about moving the date of the election, the pushback from Republicans, including Republican leadership, that the election's not going to be moved. And I think even though he thinks he's the dictator, it's not a dictatorship yet, and he's not going to be able to fully get away with something like that. So I certainly understand the concerns. One good note, and I'm always a silver lining person. I think it's being from Wisconsin. It's the way we fundamentally are. But one good note is I have Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner I follow. He's been, I think, a very accurate expert on COVID. And he said that in the Southern Hemisphere, they did not have a big flare-up of flu and other things because people were wearing masks more often. So as long as we really stick to this mask wearing and do it like we're supposed to, I think you won't have maybe the big resurgence in fall because we'll be practicing the right practices. And I'm hopeful that won't happen. So I certainly hear your concerns. Many people are thinking about that and ready. But you should know that we may not be in that situation for a number of reasons, but people are ready for anything.
Larry in Phoenix, Arizona, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my question is about the power grid. I'm concerned about losing power, and it would affect everything that we do with the house, your electrical thing, plus military bases we get hit also. Why not take the extra $25 million or billion that they gave the military in their last budget to use that to shore up the power grid?
Yeah, Larry, so I'm not sure if I'm super concerned on the power grid, other than we do have infrastructure dollars to modernize it, and that's something we do have to pass as a Congress. But you're onto something else. One of the conversations, Bernie Sanders and Barbara Lee and I led the national efforts to try to cut our defense budget by 10%. And while we weren't successful, we certainly saw a lot of progress in people moving that direction. And we think this next year is going to be crucial to develop the grassroots to do that. But another idea is you could redirect defense spending in ways that are defense, just not necessarily the traditional military ways. So, working against COVID, those defense dollars obviously are defending our country against it. Defending us against things like perhaps an energy grid or other issues also could be redirected dollars from your traditional military defense contractors to other things that defend the country. So I think you're going to see a lot of conversation in the next year on exactly that aspect of defense spending, and I'm very heartened by that.
Great. Corky in Rochester, New York. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Got a minute to the break.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Mr. Pocan. I'm worried about getting that stimulus out, and also worried about my ballot. How soon can I get it?
Yeah, generally, it's going to, again, change state by state, local by local, but I think about 6 weeks out is when in Wisconsin we mail an absentee ballot, so you will have plenty of time, but I would still recommend filling it out right away. On the stimulus, my guess is there will be another stimulus in this next package, although I'll be honest, my preference is that we take care of people who are hurting right now rather than putting out stimulus dollars if there is a competing force for the money. Dean Baker, a progressive economist, recently showed that 28.5% of people who got the stimulus check just put it in the bank because they're worried, right? They want to make sure they've got money should they need it. But that doesn't provide the stimulative effect. It gives Donald Trump a reason to send a letter to say he got you some money. But, I'm far more concerned about people who've lost a job at no fault of their own or a small business that's lost a demand at no fault of their own, and we take care of those people.
Do you think that that's going to happen soon?
I think they're going to do another stimulus check because we're 3 months from an election, unfortunately.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, 45 minutes past the hour. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour. It's Middays with Mark on the Thom Hartmann Program. Congressman Pocan taking your calls in this national town hall meeting. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And he represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll be back with your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. And welcome back. Derek in Seattle, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, gentlemen. Congressman Pocan, I'm very concerned about Attorney General William Barr whitelisting all of these extremely questionable and sometimes illegal acts of the president. My question for you is, what can Congress do to limit the power of the Attorney General in order to make sure he's accountable to the rule of law rather than to the president's ideology?
Yeah, again, this Attorney General has acted like the president's personal attorney, which is why you saw the hearing the Judiciary Committee had and, his ridiculous answers to a lot of great questions from our members of Congress, especially the Progressive Caucus. We just have to make sure that there's accountability for any Attorney General, that they have to abide in a certain way. And Barr has literally, no pun intended, lowered the bar beyond any Attorney General, I think, at least that I can think of in recent memory, in how he's acted and how he's enabled the president and just allowed him to get away with almost anything. So it really, we have an opportunity, I think, when we have the elections in fall, if we can take the Senate and the House. Hopefully, if we have to put safeguards in place, we can. If we find that in reviewing what happened, there were some weakness in our laws around the Attorney General, I think we'll have that opportunity to fix that.
Tom in Auburn, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is McConnell pushing for liability immunity for businesses and billions for the military in this latest COVID relief bill?
I'm sorry, I missed the immunity. What was the other issue you asked?
Yeah. If McConnell was trying to stuff military pork and corporate immunity into the new stimulus bill.
So I think he really does want to stuff corporate immunity, and that's a big fight we're going to have because it's the opposite direction that we're trying to do in providing protections for frontline workers. They did do stupid things in the Republican Senate bill, but I don't think that they're going anywhere. One was spending for additional F-35s. Another was doubling the exemption for 2 martini lunches for small businesses, as if that's going to help restaurants. Yeah, they were ridiculous, but they probably had some member who wanted it thrown in a package, and they did. But I doubt that those are serious. The last part are serious ones moving forward. The immunity they're very serious about, and it's a real battle we're having on this package.
So what kind of timeline do you think this is going to work out on?
From what I'm hearing, they're saying they would like to, by the end of the week, have something in place. And if they're trying to have something by the end of the week, that means I think, we would probably be very first part of next week, in voting on it. So, but that's what they said. At least they agreed to a timeline. I hope they're serious about it because we need to get the unemployment money especially out as soon as possible.
And you're guessing that instead of giving people $600 a week on top of the regular unemployment, or even $200 or $400 a week, that instead it's going to be, here's another $1,200 check for everybody?
No. It's going to be both. But that's the problem. Is we need to fund local and state governments. We need to do a lot of things. The money that goes towards a stimulus check, if it's not really providing stimulus to the economy, is misdirected money, in my opinion. We should help people who need it most. I do think there'll be additional assistance for unemployment. The question is, can we get that $600 again or not, or how high can we get?
Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We're talking with Congressman Mark Pocan, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He's taking your calls in our national town hall meeting, Middays with Mark, every Wednesday, first hour on the Thom Hartmann Program. Latest hidden history books on monopoly and oligarchy, wherever fine books are found.
So he tore children from their parents and put them in cages and ordered the U.S. government to pay $750 a day to for-profit companies that support his candidacy and his campaign and his presidency. Number one, here's a partial list of some of the crimes of Donald Trump. Refused to release his tax returns, made his fortune, largely through financial fraud, has been accused of sexually assaulting multiple women, became president as a result of the involvement of a foreign government in part, became president in part because he paid hush money to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. He described Nazis and white supremacists as very fine people. This goes way beyond the tan suit. We've got the entire list, the whole list of all of Donald Trump's crimes in a new video we post over at ThomHartmann.com for supporters of our program, so you can check it out there. He needs to be impeached.
Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Annie in Watertown, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I sent my ballot absentee off in April really quick. I didn't look at it so much, but I finally opened mine Friday and looked at it and reading the directions carefully, and it's not initialed. And I called around to everybody else, and all theirs are initialed, and it won't be counted if it's not initialed. And do I have to go in now to get it initialed? If I do, it sort of defeats the whole idea of staying home.
Yeah, that's one thing you're right. You should look for right away, Annie, because that means the clerk just made a simple problem. They might be able to send you another one if you call to them right away, and you can turn it around. But you may have to drop it off in person. But you could drop it off at your local unit of government, not necessarily on election day. In Wisconsin, Tom, we have a primary on Tuesday, so I know the dilemma she's facing. But that's why when you get that 6 weeks out, you can check to make sure it's ready to go, it's proper. You can fill it out, and you'll have plenty of time to get it in. So thanks, Annie, for raising that, because that's a good point, why people should look at the ballot when they get it, and even more important, fill it out as soon as they get it so they don't have a problem.
Steve in Standardsville, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, hello. I have a real simple question. What can Congress do to try and combat all the fake news that's put out there by Fox and Newsmax and some of these crazy websites, because it's really affecting about a third of our voting population. And I just don't even see if Biden wins, and I'm sure he's going to, how he's going to be able to govern when so many people have been brainwashed with this stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I hear you. I have a little bit different theory, Steve, though. I also think that there's a substantial portion of that limited amount of people that still support Donald Trump, no matter what, who are largely racist, and they're backing him because of those views, and therefore they'll accept pretty much anything else from their president because they're feeling somehow they're afraid of what's happening to the country rather than being proud of what's happening with our country. So I don't know if it's just the media sources in and of themselves. I think there's some people who the reason they do whatever Donald Trump says and they believe whatever stupid thing that comes out of his Twitter account is because they're just so happy to have someone who shares their xenophobic or racist views. And I would have said that 4 years ago, but watching people stick with him, even on COVID, as poor as his performance has been, tells me there's something more to it.
Kathy in Fresno, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, I did not receive my first stimulus check, and I qualify for one, my wife and I. And on the IRS Gov site, my Social Security is not matching up with my address. And there's no way to talk to anybody. I don't know what to do to be able to get my first stimulus check. And I've sent in a paper refund, my tax forms, April 14th, and I still haven't received my refund.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm glad you called. So this is for anyone who knows someone in your situation. This is a good reason to call your member of Congress or your U.S. Senator. That's why we have caseworkers in the office, because if you qualified, you should have gotten it. The problem is at some point they said that they won't be sending checks out. It'll just be something for the future for your tax refund. So you'll still get it, but you won't see it now. Again, it doesn't provide any stimulus. That's why I'm not a big fan of this concept of a one-time check. Regular payments, I'd be a big fan of, right? Because that would make some sense. But a one-time check just because Donald Trump wants to send you a letter, and then your situation and others is why it doesn't perform that stimulative effect. But call your member of Congress or your U.S. Senator and have their office do some casework and help you out on this.
Yeah, it's also possible if somebody stole her Social Security number and she's the victim of fraud in that regard. She should double check that too, eh?
That's why when you check, they can find all that out for you, because I know it's hard to call the IRS and get those information yourself.
There you go. Judy in Denver, we just have a little more than a minute to the break. Judy, or to the end of the hour. Quick question?
Okay. Yeah, the Treasury is printing money like it's going out of style, and they are now going to be giving trillions of dollars to other dictators like Bolsonaro of Brazil. Can anything be done to stop this? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I fully understand it.
I think Judy means the Fed.
Dollars. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Judy, let me put it this way. I mean, a lot of people are concerned about, I'm going to do it from our perspective of Congress, deficit or debt spending, and yet there's a lot of good economists. We had Robert Reich on the call with the Progressive Caucus. I'm forgetting the person who just wrote the Deficit Myth book about modern monetary theory. I mean, we often, when the economy gets strong again, it builds us out of this, but this is the time that we have to spend money on ourselves at least, and some of it can be assistance to countries who really need it, but not if it's something that obviously is just going to a pal of Donald Trump's. But this is the time for us to be spending trillions of dollars to get us out of this hole, to make sure that Americans aren't hurt and they don't lose their homes and they can feed their families. So I'm in strong support of the most robust package we can do that makes sense.
That would be in Congress, yeah. Congress, we're hitting the end of the hour here. Thanks so much again for dropping by every week and talking with us, Congressman Pocan.
Of course, Tom. Thank you, as always.
Thank you. Yeah, great talking with you. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a few minutes as we come up on the top of the hour here. And the Roots Action folks are going to be with us in the third hour. It's going to be fascinating. Phil Donahue's old senior producer, Jeff Cohen, will be with us. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code Tom. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps Hair Loss Treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code Tom.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the Ongoing Dehumanizing Legacy of the Doctrine of Discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from Chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice, I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries. From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. We need to talk about Trump-proofing democracy for 2024 and beyond. You know, the billionaires with among, you know, I mean, there's some good billionaires. But there's a lot of right-wing billionaires who are essentially embracing fascism. They've been embracing the Republican Party forever, put Trump into office. They continue to support him. And they're carefully watching Trump and his administration. They're watching Bill Barr to see what works and what doesn't. How far can you push the destruction of the United States of America? How far can you push the rule of law? How much into the corner can you push American working people? We've stripped American working people of unions. The billionaires have with their bought and paid for laws and Supreme Court. They have stripped workers of protections. They're gutting OSHA, for example. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And in every case, they're saying, how far can we push this? And Trump has been, sometimes intentionally, sometimes just because he's bumbling, has pushed the lines. A lot of things were held together by tradition, not law. He has just smashed through those. Now not just now, all throughout his presidency, he's also trashing the law itself. And, whether it's stuff like, hawking Goya beans from the Resolute desk in the White House, Remember when Obama saluting a guy at Marine One with a coffee cup in his hand was a scandal? Fox News bloviated about it for 3 days. He's got, so anyway, so these billionaires are watching as he's doing everything he can to, as Steve Bannon said, deconstruct the administrative state. In other words, tear apart America and divide us individually as a political strategy. This is what Trump is doing. And he's already revealed a number of areas where our rule of law is deficient. It's not strong enough, including the ability to hold a president to account for crimes he's committed while in office, and how much damage a president can do by putting lobbyists in charge of virtually every federal agency, which is obviously what Trump has done. And many of these holes and cracks and weaknesses in our republic that Trump has exploited were actually put into place by the Supreme Court in the 1970s and by Congress after 9/11. The Buckley and Bellotti Supreme Court decisions in the 1970s gave corporations and billionaires the right to own politicians and political parties. And the Patriot Act and similar legislation since 9/11 have given the president vast police powers that throughout history we've only seen in authoritarian strongman governments. And all of these need to be urgently reevaluated, rescinded, or replaced. In addition, and the other thing to keep in mind, and I think this is a BFD, to paraphrase Joe Biden, is that both he and the Democratic Party need to keep in mind that in 2024, in all probability, the Democratic nominee is going to be whoever Biden picks for vice president right now. On the Republican side, it's most likely going to be either Mitt Romney or someone like him, a corporate Democrat, or Tom Cotton or someone like him, a right-wing, hardcore, racist, fascist Republican. Did I say Mitt Romney was a corporate Democrat? He was a corporate Republican. You know what I mean. In either case, the Democrats need to be ready politically for 2024, and that means getting ready right now. And making sure that whoever, and Biden needs to be thinking about whoever he's going to pick for vice president needs to be somebody who can not just step into the presidency if anything, God forbid, should happen to Joe Biden, but also can successfully run for the presidency in 2024 against either a Mitt Romney or a Tom Cotton. I mean, if anything else, Biden has said he wants to pick somebody who he's comfortable with. I think the number one criteria should be, could this person run for the White House and win against a Tom Cotton or a Mitt Romney? Either case. I mean, we've got a laser focus on stripping out the oligarchic and fascist elements that have crept into our republic since the Powell memo, since these multiple Supreme Court interventions, right-wing, in every single case, or virtually every single case, 5-4 decisions, right-wing decisions, and the Patriot Act, and other laws that have given more power to the president during times of emergency, during times of essentially war without a declaration of war. We need to change this stuff. We need to reverse this stuff. We need to clean this up. George W. Bush and Dick Cheney got away with literally murder. They committed murder. They tortured people to death illegally. They built and maintained a prison offshore in Cuba and used that to torture people. And it's still going on illegally, unconstitutionally. I was going code red back in 2004 when, in the first years of this program, in 2003, over what George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were up to, and how that was inevitably going to lead to the rise of essentially neo-fascism in the United States. And guess what? Here we are. And now we've seen the face of it. Donald Trump has torn the mask off the Republican Party. It was all a lie all along. The Republican Party since 1980 has been a front group for big corporations, against small companies, against local, family-owned businesses. It's been a front group for giant corporations, and it's been a front group for by the way, and against, organized labor as well. And it's been a front group for the billionaire class, generally speaking, and multimillionaires. And we're now at a turning point. This is a serious moment. And we need to be discussing, how do we stop the slide into fascism? Even after Trump is gone, assuming that he leaves in January. How do we repair our republic? How do we stop the slide into oligarchy? This is, I just finished writing this book. It'll be out in February or March, the hidden history of oligarchy in the United States, and it's specific to America. How do we pull back to those small d democratic values, what used to be referred to in the 1700s and throughout the 1800s as a republican form of government, not referring to the party, but to the idea that it's a republic that is organized around the will of the majority of the people, operating within the context of a constitutional infrastructure, the rule of law, and that the principal purpose of the Constitution is to constrain the government from extraordinary and excessive behavior. How do we get back to that? Now that we've got an executive branch completely out of control, we've got a Department of Justice completely out of control, you've got an FCC that's in the pockets of the telco companies and the ISPs, you've got a U.S. Department of Agriculture that's in the pocket of the chicken and beef billionaires. You've got a Food and Drug Administration that's now in the. They're all being run by lobbyists, right? Now in the pocket of the big drug companies. We've got, step after step after step. What we're seeing here. The Interior Department in the hands of a coal lobbyist, the EPA in the hands of an oil lobbyist. How do we put this back together? I think, number one, we need to get money out of politics. We need to reverse these Supreme Court decisions. Number two, we need to strengthen we need to go back to the idea that only Congress can declare war. And without a declaration of war, not one shot may be fired by an American soldier anywhere in the world. We need to seriously reevaluate our military budget. And these are the starting points. What would you add to that list?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we need to be seriously thinking about the candidates that we're going to be putting forward 2 and 4 years from now and planning for the 2024 election. And welcome back. Jeff in Asheville, North Carolina, listening on TuneIn. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
So I'm baffled by the fact that no one in the media ever puts Trump on the spot over the failure to handle the travel ban, the air travel closing from Europe. They all just came back. They should have been taken to a plane, to a bus, and directly to a hotel to be tested and quarantined if necessary. Is that too much to ask?
No, it's not. And look what happened in Chicago when he did finally do this. You had, literally thousands of people stacked up in the airport for hours at a time waiting to get through customs, jammed together. It was a COVID petri dish. It was insane.
That's how the government should have done it. It wouldn't be complicated, but it's necessary. That's their job, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jeff. One of a thousand other things that this guy has just completely screwed up. Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind?
Well, I was wondering, you were talking about changes that might need to be made. Why can't they pass a law that if the president's being impeached, that the Attorney General answers to the Speaker of the House and not the president?
Oh, that's a really interesting idea.
Because then the president doesn't have the power to manipulate the Speaker of the House, the Attorney General.
Right. I don't know if that would pass constitutional muster, what the Supreme Court would say about it, because the impeachment process is laid out in the Constitution. But it may well, and it makes a lot of sense, Mark. That's just like, a super common sense. That was the only thing I could
come up that would actually rein in somebody like Barr. I couldn't think of any other alternative rein in somebody that's as renegade as Barr.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing would be to strengthen, to clarify and strengthen Congress's subpoena power. The ability of Congress to demand that the president respond to a subpoena.
Well, unless they're going to clean out the jail in Congress and then actually start locking people up, somebody like Trump's just not going to. I don't care if you strengthen it or not. He's just not going to abide by it. If he's not going to get locked up, he's not going to listen to it.
Right. Well, and we saw this with the impeachment, where he refused to provide even one single witness to the committee. Or even one single piece of paper, which, by the way, should have been an impeachable offense in and of itself, obstruction of Congress.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a big one. Mark, thank you for the call. That's a great suggestion. I wanted to share with you, by the way, this extraordinary story out of Georgia. Georgia has opened many of their schools this week. Yeah, I get it. It's August 5th, but hey, it's Georgia. And this Brad Reed writing over at rawstory.com, first sentence kind of summarizes it. An entire classroom full of second graders. Now, Trump on Fox and Friends this morning said children don't get coronavirus. It was a lie, but hey, people watching Fox News believe this. Okay, back to the story by Brad Reed over at Raw Story. An entire classroom full of second graders in Georgia has been forced into quarantine after one classmate tested positive for the novel coronavirus, also known as the Trump virus. Local news station WGCL reports that a student at the Sixes Elementary School in Cherokee County was diagnosed with COVID-19 just after that student attended class on Monday, which was the first day back at school after the summer break. All 20 students who are in the class, as well as the student's teacher, will now be under quarantine for the next 2 weeks, and they will be taught over the internet. And Trump is tweeting, "Open the schools," in all caps. He tweeted that last night. This is nuts. We'll be back. You can support our program by supporting the station you're listening to right now and thanking our sponsors for advertising with us. Welcome back. A couple of things I wanted to flag for you. Number one, here in Portland, members of the Portland Interfaith Clergy Resistance in purple vests have been present with protesters for more than 60 days. Yes, those people down there who are getting tear gassed and beaten, well, not anymore. The feds have stopped, participating, and they're starting to wear uniforms now. But in any case, they represent Jewish and Christian traditions. We don't have a Muslim member yet, but clergy in support. So first it was moms, then it was veterans. Oh, no, first it was moms, then it was dads, then it was veterans, and now it's clergy. A great meme that's floating around the internet right now. It's big on Facebook. Jared Kushner advised Trump to let coronavirus ravage our country because he thought it would mostly kill people in blue states. Jared and Trump wanted to use the pandemic to unleash mass death on their political enemies and then use it as an election talking point. Make no mistake, this is a criminal act, and the Trump crime family needs to be prosecuted for mass murder. I am with you on that. In science news, there's something hinky going on with Gilead, this drug manufacturing company. This is the company that brought out remdesivir, which is being used right now with COVID patients all across the country. They're charging between $2,300 and $3,100 for a 5-day course of remdesivir. It's very profitable. They're going to probably make $3 billion this year off this drug. But it turns out that there's another drug that Gilead developed. It's called GS 441-524, or 441-524. And it's very similar to remdesivir, and it appears to be more effective. It has demonstrated market effectiveness and safety in animal studies. In cultured cells, it's actually superior to remdesivir. It enters lung cells and is almost instantly converted into its active form that halts reproduction of the virus. It's a smaller molecule and it's more water soluble than remdesivir, so it doesn't need to be injected. It could be taken as a pill or it could be inhaled. It's substantially easier to manufacture. And in humans, when you give a human an injection of remdesivir, it converts into this substance in the body, this GS-441.524. So if it's a better drug than remdesivir, why isn't Gilead making it available? Well, it turns out that this drug was patented in 2010 for MERS. Both this drug and MERS were developed for MERS and remdesivir. But this was patented in 2010, whereas remdesivir was patented in 2015. So if Gilead brings out remdesivir, they have, 5 years longer of having a patent, being able to sell the drug as a brand name at much higher prices. So we now have this, watchdog group, Public Citizen. Ralph Nader started this group back in the 70s, Public Citizen, publicly asking, why is Gilead withholding a drug that appears to be more effective, cheaper to make, easier to administer? Why are they withholding this drug in order to promote the sales of remdesivir? Well, it looks like the reason that Gilead is doing this, and this should raise all kinds of flags and feeds into my question of, what do we do going forward to try to put America back together again? It looks like Gilead may be doing this because remdesivir will be more profitable because its patent is 5 years more recent. And so they'll be able to sell it for a longer period of time at the higher patent medicine prices as opposed to it going generic and becoming less expensive. And if that's the case, and Public Citizen is, trying to find this out through legal processes and lawsuits and things, and basically trying to shame Gilead into bringing this drug out. If this is the case, it is an absolute indictment of our for-profit healthcare system here in the United States. That would be unconscionable. By the way, yesterday was primary day in a whole bunch of states, and in Missouri, not only did the good citizens of Missouri turn out in large numbers to say, yes, we want Medicaid expansion after all the Republicans in the state, including the governor, have been hard fighting expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act in Missouri so that low income and poor working people can have health care. The citizens themselves voted for this on Tuesday. But also in the Democratic primary in that election, there's a seat that has been held by William Lacey Clay. He's the representative in the U.S. House of Representatives from Missouri. That seat has been held by him or his father, Representative William Clay Sr., since 1969. It's a family dynasty. Democratic. But, not particularly progressive. And Cori Bush, who is an outspoken progressive activist and also a veteran of the racial justice protest movement. Both Bush and Clay are African American. Cori Bush handily beat Clay in this primary, which is, I think a good sign for progressive candidates and progressive values as we go into this election. And, we've seen this now happen over and over again in Democratic primaries where progressive candidates are doing really well. Rashida Tlaib in Detroit won her primary. She had, in fact, it was a rematch. She had won against her contender. I think the person she ran against was named Jones. And she won by only 1 point 2 years ago in the primary and has only been in Congress for 2 years. Member of the squad, right? This time she won by like 60 some odd percent to 30 some odd percent. I mean, it was a blowout for her. So, progressives are doing really well. And that's a good sign. As I said to Congressman Pocan earlier, I think that this COVID pandemic has exposed the structural weaknesses of neoliberalism and neoliberal policies in the United States. And is pushing us all in a more
to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And I personally think that's a good thing. We'll be back with your calls right after this break. It's coming up on 28 minutes past the hour.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Russia Trap, How Our Shadow War with Russia Could Spiral into Nuclear Catastrophe by George S. Beebe. This is from the introduction. This book is a pre-mortem, an examination of a failure that has not yet happened. It focuses on one of the most difficult problems that statesmen face, how to anticipate and avoid a war that no one wants and few believe is likely or even possible, but nonetheless arises because of a combustive mixture of clashing ambitions, new technologies, misplaced fears, entangled alliances and commitments, domestic political pressures, and mistaken assumptions about how adversaries might react. In other words, it's about diagnosing and diffusing a nascent World War I problem with Russia. What was then called the Great War produced what was arguably the greatest man-made catastrophe in human history. It ended a century of relatively peaceful balance of power among Europe's leading states. It destroyed the Ottoman Empire and laid the basis for a century of war and terrorism in the Middle East. It hastened the demise of the British Empire and led to Hitler's rise, the destruction of World War II, the tragedy of the Holocaust, and the development of nuclear weapons. It paved the way to Soviet communism and decades of Cold War that spanned the globe. It decimated a generation of Europeans and left in its wake a nihilistic philosophical legacy that has devastating consequences for societies across the Western world. And almost no one saw World War I coming. World War I resulted more from miscalculation and ineptitude than from design. Historians have long debated which of the combatants bore the most responsibility for the conflict, but few dispute that each of the major powers contributed its quota of short-sightedness and irresponsibility to the disaster. Germany feared encirclement by France, Russia, and Britain, but ham-handedly threatened each in ways that encouraged them to unite in an unprecedented alliance against Berlin. That alliance, in turn, cemented Germany's dependence on Austria-Hungary and ultimately made it a hostage to its southern neighbors' actions. Britain believed the alliance would contain Germany's growing military and economic might, not lock London into a set of rigid commitments that made diplomatic resolution of a localized conflict all but impossible. Austria-Hungary's fear that nationalism could tear its empire apart from within blinded it to the dangers that a limited war in the Balkans could quickly spin into a catastrophic European conflagration. Tsar Nicholas II assumed that a limited mobilization against Austria-Hungary would deter aggression against Russia's friend Serbia, only to learn that his general staff's war plans mandated a full mobilization against Austria-Hungary and Germany. The spread of railway technology in turn meant that any state that did not mobilize its army quickly in response faced the near certain prospect of a rapid military defeat. The result was a potent mix of volatile ingredients that fueled what Henry Kissinger called a political doomsday machine, susceptible to any number of political triggers. Few people in Washington today believe that our tense relations with Russia pose this type of challenge. Rather, the dominant paradigm for understanding and responding to the Russian threat is, quote, the World War II problem. American editorials and op-eds about Russia abound with disparaging references to Munich, where British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain made his tragic bid to appease Hitler's territorial ambitions in 1938 and achieved his ill-fated peace in our time. During the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign, Democratic Party candidate Hillary Clinton explicitly warned that Moscow's claims that it must protect Russian minorities in the Ukraine echoed Nazi Germany's arguments that it had to protect German minorities in Poland and Czechoslovakia. Similarly, Senator Lindsey Graham and many other Republicans have likened Russian President Putin to Adolf Hitler, while newspaper columnists referred to him as Putler. Like Hitler, Putin is perceived as an authoritarian leader harboring deep resentments over lost territory and unfair treatment. Like Hitler, Putin is believed to regard calls for diplomatic compromise as signs of weakness that he can exploit. And like Hitler, Putin is thought to harbor expansionist designs that will be curbed only by pushing back now before he grows too strong. For those who see the Russian threat through this prism, the chief danger is the Kremlin's aggressive intentions, and the imperative is to deter aggression through strength. Wars often happen because those who start them think they can win. Disabusing an aggressor of that belief, therefore, is critical to preserving the peace. For intelligence analysts, this translates into a focus on studying Russian war plans and weapon systems while looking for signs of impending attack. U.S. and NATO military experts analyzing Russia's preparations for its large West military exercise in 2017, for example, issued warnings that the event could be a Russian Trojan horse, masking preparations for occupying Belarus or invading one of the Baltic states. British intelligence officials caution that Russian cyber operators have acquired the ability to shut down power plants, hijack air traffic control, and even turn off air conditioning systems. U.S. intelligence community leaders sound alarms about Moscow's desire to undermine Western democracy and destroy the post-World War II international order. Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman, sponsored by a committee that includes former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, solemnly warns America in a viral social media video that we are at war already with Russia and must fight back or suffer defeat. Not everyone views Russia as offensive-minded, however. A smaller and less popular school of thought sees Russia under Putin as a weak and declining power. The book, The Russia Trap.
With us and how the Trump administration boosts deregulation by undervaluing the impacts of climate change. Tony Corbo drops by about a new rule. Americans are now eating chickens with cancer. Ew, is that healthy? He'll let you know. Jenny Harbine tells us about a new lawsuit to stop Trump from handing public land to coal companies. Plus, geeky science. School openings? Well, studies now show young kids could spread COVID-19 as easily as older children and adults. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. Just to keep you up to date on the breaking news, this whole wide variety of breaking news, but as things happen, I try to bring it to your attention. This was yesterday, Richard Blumenthal, after our show was off the air, Richard Blumenthal tweeted, he is, by the way, the Democratic senator from, I believe, Connecticut. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. But in any case, he is on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And he just tweeted, his Twitter handle is SEN, as in Senator SEN Blumenthal, and I retweeted it just a little bit ago with my comment, which was, whoa, something really big is going on. Richard Blumenthal tweeted, in advance of the classified briefing I will hear later today, I reviewed classified documents this morning. They are chilling. Declassify this information. Americans deserve and need to know about ongoing foreign interference, even sabotage, in our election system. Now, this is a senior member of the Senate Intelligence Committee saying, declassify this information so that Americans can know about it. But of course, the Senate is controlled by Mitch McConnell, sometimes referred to as Moscow Mitch. I don't think we're going to see much of that happening, but this is a big deal, and you know, more attention needs to be paid to it. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and then I'll pick up your phone calls, is what's going on at the State Department. It's the tale of the two Stevens. Originally, Stephen Linick was the Inspector General, the IG, for the State Department. I've described this before. You watch these cop shows, you know, and somebody comes in from internal affairs to investigate a police officer or a police department. Internal affairs is like the internal police department within the police department. Some, you know, who will watch the watchers, right? The old question. Well, it's the internal affairs in a police department. And, you know, they're hated by all the cops and all this kind of stuff, but they're members of the police department. Same thing with the inspectors general. This was a position that was created by Congress, I believe, right after the Nixon scandals, after the Nixon bribery scandals and everything that was going on with that. But it was created by Congress during my lifetime. and this position of Inspector General. They are supposed to be independent of the agency, but they work in the agency, just like internal affairs would be in a police department. And Stephen Linick was the Inspector General for the State Department. The State Department, of course, is run by Mike Pompeo, former Tea Party, cokehead, right-wing member of Congress from Kansas, now our Secretary of State. And Steve Linick, the Inspector General, started looking into Mike Pompeo and his wife having, flying around the world and staying in fancy hotels and doing all sorts of weird stuff on your and my nickel, on taxpayer dollars. And so Pompeo went to Trump and said, fire this guy. And he's admitted he told Trump to fire him. So Trump fired him. Trump fired Stephen Linick. So Stephen Linick's number two, a guy by the name of Stephen Ackard, A-K-A-R-D, became the acting Inspector General. So last week, Congress subpoenaed a bunch of people at the State Department to try to get to the bottom of what Pompeo is trying to hide from the Inspector General. Ackard was not among the people who were subpoenaed. The subpoenas were issued for the Merrick String, the Deputy Assistant Attorney of State for Political and Military Affairs, Michael Miller, Senior Advisor Tony A. Porter, and Undersecretary of State for Management Brian Bulato. Those are the people who were subpoenaed. But the acting director, Stephen Ackard, was not subpoenaed, but today, abruptly, he just resigned. And it appears that he's resigning because he is upset with the way that the State Department is trying to stonewall this investigation. So I have a strong suspicion that there's going to be another shoe dropping, and we need to keep an eye on this. Anyhow, to your calls. Michelle in Denver, Colorado. Hey, Michelle, what's up?
You were talking about how do we get money out of politics and how do we change how people are elected. It's up to the people. Unfortunately, in America, people don't care, literally don't care. If it doesn't affect them, they aren't worried about it. And so you get a George Bush who they'd like to have a beer with instead of looking at what type of issues are important and the bigger picture, everybody in America. So unfortunately, until that changes, we're not going to see a lot of big difference. And that's why you can't get Medicare for all. Medicare for all won't happen until we can find a way to convince people that it would actually be good. Or if there's another option that could possibly help us bring down the insane amounts for insurance and everything else. This country is literally divided. And some of the people are divided within the Democratic Party, unfortunately.
Sure.
I have friends that don't pay attention.
Yeah, Michelle, don't you think that people might pay attention if they weren't getting a steady diet of BS from not just Fox News and right-wing hate radio, but it's coming out of right-wing think tanks. The other day, I was Googling something about Social Security because Medicare, because I'm working on this book about healthcare, which will be out next fall. And the top 7 out of 9 hits that I got on the first, or the 7 out of 10 that I got when I Googled were all right-wing think tanks. Every single one of them. Trashing Social Security, trashing Medicare, building the case for privatizing it, all this kind of stuff. And that's what, this is the information bubble that everybody lives in, because ever since the Powell memo, these giant corporations and these billionaires have gotten together and said, okay, we're going to just completely confound the American public. Half of Wikipedia now is useless because it's been edited to death, by right-wingers. It's just breathtaking. It seems to me that we've got an information crisis more than just Americans don't care. I don't think this is a character flaw. I think Americans are living in a very, very confusing information world.
I would say that's half of it, but I have people that don't feel politics are important, that it's not important to pay attention to what's going on, what bill's being passed, what's being put forward by this candidate or that candidate. They turn it off. They literally turn it off. That is why we're still fighting for equality. As an African American, I'm on the front lines protesting. But do you see thousands upon thousands doing this on a regular basis? No. They do it when something happens, when it's effective. You know, just like with the young people, now they're paying attention, but you should have been paying attention all along. Once you turn 18, your focus should be towards your future. And unfortunately, we live in a country that is too watered down and too microwave. If it's not happening instantaneously, people get bored and they stop paying attention. And this is what angers me as a person who actually contributes, knocks on doors, makes phone calls, you know, tries to educate people, like you said, the right wing people out there that are listening and gobbling up this Fox News and not paying attention, is we need a lot more people to do this. And in order for your future to be better, you have to think about other people's future. This is a world.
Yep.
We all got to live in it, including with Europe. Yeah, and we can learn from them, and they can learn from us, and we can exchange. Because had we asked Europe how this race thing was going to go, maybe we would be at a better solution right now, because they've been through it. My mom's German, so I know what it's like to be oppressed, and I also know what it was like to live under Hitler if you didn't believe in him, because she was thrown out of her house at 2. She caught scarlet fever. Wow. They were put on a train because not everybody believed in Hitler. And to quantify a whole race of people by that and still punish them for it is ridiculous, because people fought against it too. So there's just things we need to exchange as a global world economy, as a global world that needs to live together, that needs to exchange money, that has to live in a clean, energy efficient world where we're not spending thousands upon thousands of dollars on military that's going to people in need. I mean, you could see the homeless here in Colorado. It has grown because of this coronavirus, and I'm sick. I'm able to work from home, but how many people are giving to organizations that are helping? How many people really care about what's happening? We've got to pay more attention, and we have to be laser focused. If you have kids, you should worry about your kids' future. My God, what does it take for people to wake up? That's the problem I have, because I see this on a regular basis. People just turning it off. Well, you're turning it off, but things are happening. People are suffering in this country, in the world. You know, we could come together and fix it, but we got to work together, and we got to pay attention to what's happening here.
I'm with you, Michelle. I'm absolutely with you. And I think that the coronavirus, if nothing else, is causing a lot of people to go, and this massive unemployment, you know, the Trump virus and the Trump depression. But your point is very well taken. Thank you very much, Michelle. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Stay with us. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. Viagra for your brain. Just don't tell Limbaugh. He'll want some. But it does not lead to stiff thinking. And welcome back. John in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and down here, you know, TVA, it's Tennessee Valley Authority. There's some huge news going on right now that I think will affect, most everybody, but maybe they don't know about it. You know, TVA is a
tell me about it.
Is a public utility. Most people don't know. Maybe they do. TVA is a public utility, and they have board of directors that's appointed by the president and have to be confirmed by the Senate. Well, 2 days ago, maybe, Trump fired the chairman of the board of directors and the past chairman. Now, the reason, and he told the rest of the directors that if they don't fire the CEO, that he would, fire them as well. Now, on the surface, it looks like what he's trying to do is TVA a couple of months ago announced that they were outsourcing the IT department to overseas. Well, that's not a good thing. I understand that. Right. But under that rouge, he's doing this, he's saying because of that. But the real reason, Tom,
you think he's setting it up for privatization?
That, yes, but here's the step he's taken. You're correct there. But he's taking these steps to get there. If you remember a couple of months ago, maybe more than that, he was upset, had one of his patented Trump fits, because the board of directors did not. They closed Paradise Coal Plant in Kentucky. Now, you know that's one of his big promises back when he was running, that he was going to bring back the coal industry, even though it's got a net loss of coal jobs right now. But they closed that facility up there in Paradise, huge plant there in Paradise. But it was ineffective. It was, just a nasty plant, and it was just going to cost too much to keep running. So TVA made the decision to shut that plant down. Trump was infuriated, and he pledged right then he was going to get back at him. And I think I know he is. He's using this ruse right here to get rid of those people now and, like I say, get rid of the board. Yeah, this is a pivotal time right now for TVA. Like I say, in this region, it's huge. It's big news here. Probably not the rest of the place, but it's the largest, I believe, the largest public utility in the United States. So, like I say, and he wants to privatize it.
Yeah, it was created by Franklin Roosevelt, as I recall.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So is
that's correct. Yes.
John, you're there in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Is this a large topic of conversation? Is it in the local papers? Are people generally supportive of Trump or outraged, or what's going on? How's it playing out in local politics?
Well, the first day, headline news. Trump fires board of directors and the past director and all this stuff. And because of the outsourcing, it said. Well, this morning the paper says, the workers are buoyed by Trump, firing the board of directors.
Made happy.
It ain't got nothing to do with it. He could care less about outsourcing the IT department. You know as well as I do, Tom, that he only does things that's going to help him. He could care less. I mean, look at his golf courses. How many illegal immigrants did he have on these golf courses where he got caught? And he could care less about that. Right. But he wants to do this other thing, and that's the ruse he's using. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense to me, John. And, privatizing anything that's public right now is real high on his agenda and the agenda of the libertarian billionaires who support him, the Kochs and Mercers and whatnot. John, thank you for the heads up on that. You put it on my radar screen. I'll look for some stories on it. Thank you, John. And I wish you well in fighting a good fight. We'll be right back. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. The hidden history of guns and the Second Amendment tells how the Second Amendment was written to protect Georgia's slave patrols. So we need to be thinking right now about how to Trump-proof the presidency in the future. I mean, Donald Trump is causing all kinds of chaos and disasters, and things are, frankly, I think, going to get much worse before they get better. And I don't think they're going to get better until after January 21st or January, noon on January 20th. And that's assuming that, absolute craziness doesn't happen. But, there's a bunch of steps that we need to take, from recalibrating or fixing how we do our elections, to fixing how we handle money in politics, to fixing the pardon power of the presidency, to specifically saying that if a president is found to be a criminal, he or she can still be held to account. I mean, just straightforward stuff. And we need to be getting ready to do this. I lay it all out in a new video for people who support our program that you can find over at thomhartmann.com. Hi, Thom Hartmann here with you. I was just on the commercial side, just reading an ad for a new advertiser. We've got Teef Health. TEEF health.com is the website, but it's a powder prebiotic that makes your dog's breath good. And the ad copy said, put it in your dog's water bowl. And I was thinking, I wonder for how many people that's the toilet bowl. And do you want to put in anyway, I probably shouldn't have even gone there. My apologies. Okay, back to your calls. Maurice in Chicago. Hey, Maurice, what's up?
The cost of living is still up, Tom.
Indeed it is. And the rent's too damn high.
I know, and you'll never get any argument from anybody when you answer that thing, what's up, like that.
I see. Okay.
How do we handle,
What's on your mind?
sir. God bless you, man. Here is how we handle the evil oligarchs. Mm-hmm. We mount a major assault on the major banks. And I'm not talking about a 1 or 2 day symbolic protest here, Tom. I'm talking about hitting them hard and hurting them bad. I'm talking about customers, millions of customers who have accounts at Citigroup, Chase, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, the banksters, as you like to call them sometimes. Close your accounts, sever your connections, fire your banker, and say to whoever you do the transaction with, fix my country. Thank you, brother.
And open, yeah, you're welcome, Maurice. And I would add to that, and open an account in a local credit union. Credit unions are nonprofit. They've got their own backstop federal agency, just like FDIC, so that, you know, if they go down, you're covered up to, I think, $250,000. And, you know, when you put money into a credit union, you become basically a shareholder in that credit union. You can run for office.
Yes.
Yeah, all the positions on the board of directors, they're all elected from people who have money in that credit union. I mean, you can actually get politically active in your credit union. Maurice, brilliant. Thank you very much. Great to hear from you. I appreciate that. Judy in Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Hey, Judy, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, long time. In response to the woman that called in and was having a problem with getting her stimulus and her refund, I'm a volunteer through the IRS's low-income taxpayer program. And
good on you.
She needs to go to irs.gov and click on Where's My Refund? It's right on the main page. You can also do address corrections and so forth right through the website. If they did not change their address, she needs to request a PIN number from the IRS because they will not process a tax return without it in the future.
Yeah, my instinct was to guess that she. I mean, this happens literally, thousands of times a day in America. That she was one of these people whose Social Security number got hijacked, and somebody went in and changed her, presumably her tax refunds, maybe even Social Security, but somebody's trying to rip her off, basically.
That's why I suggested that in addition to correcting her address. The other thing is there's a website called congress.gov, because you were asking about the different bills. And you can go in there. I subscribe, and I get a weekly email from Library of Congress showing the most viewed bills. And the one I got today shows, or yesterday actually, shows the two CARES Act, the Senate and the House version. And there's a little link in the email. You can click and go right in and read the breakdown of the bills. And it's really fascinating.
Congress.gov.
So anyway, it's Congress.gov. There's a House.gov and a Senate.gov. You go into Congress.gov. You can read Senate and House.
Oh, that's spectacular, Judy. Thank you. I just wrote that down.
Weekly, right? And it has a little link on the S or HR number where you can click right in and read it.
Great. Judy, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching us down there in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Diane, another Arkansas call. Diane in Little Rock, Arkansas. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind?
I've been a substitute in Arkansas school districts for the last 6 years. I will not be a substitute yet. Arkansas schools are supposed to open in 2 weeks, and the congressman was stating that they'll see what happens when the school districts start in the South with the COVID. And I personally think our cases are going up in Arkansas, and they're planning on having football and started limited football practice already. My friends and I have discussed this, and we think these schools in Arkansas for in-class learning. Now, teachers, parents have an option of online, maybe coming to school and then school full-time. But our prediction is within a month, schools will be shut down to the COVID virus. But I tell you what, I am not going to be a test rat in this experiment.
Yeah, I understand, Diane, and I would take the exact same position were it me or my family. It's a little less risky for a teacher in their 20s, but even then, people in their 20s are dying from this as well. Diane, thank you for the call. I wish you the very best, and we'll continue the program right after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps Hair Loss Treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Gar Alperovitz's book, What Then Must We Do? Gar is an economist, by the way, and this is from the introduction. I borrowed my title, What Then Must We Do, from Tolstoy and the profoundly disturbing 1886 book that he wrote once he began to dig below the surface of what was happening in late 19th century Russia, a time when the system was in decay, the aristocracy enjoyed extraordinary luxury, and the peasants endured lives of hunger and pain. As a person of privilege, he began to understand something deeper about his time in history. Tolstoy wrote, I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, and yet assure myself and others that I am very sorry for him and wish to ease his lot by all means possible, except by getting off his back. Most of us do not literally sit on men's backs, making them carry us. We do, however, often uneasily look the other way, satisfying ourselves with modest changes that reassure us that all is well, while millions are in despair. We've done the best we can do, we might say, given the realities. Still, many sense, as did Tolstoy, that to actually do something serious would require us to confront much deeper problems than we are commonly willing to do. What then must we do is not shouted in the streets, but it is a question that more and more Americans, young and old, liberal, radical, and conservative, are quietly beginning to ask themselves in much more penetrating ways. So let us begin. My starting point is the obvious fact that despite its great wealth, the United States faces today enormous difficulties, with no easily discernible political answers that even begin to offer strategic handholds on a truly democratic future. Elections occur and major fiscal debates ensue, but many of the most pressing problems facing ordinary citizens are only marginally affected, and in many cases in ways that increase burdens, not reduce them. The issue is not simply that our situation is worrisome, however. It is that there are growing reasons to believe that we in fact face systemic problems, not simply political ones. Systemic problems in the fundamental, not the superficial sense. In the pages ahead, I will suggest that our nation's truly critical problems are built into the very structure of the economic and political system. They are not something passing in the night that will go away even when we elect forward-looking thinkers and actively pressure them to move in a different direction. I won't load you down with statistics at this point. A couple of obvious reminders, however. Not only has the economy been stagnating for a long time, but for the average person and the average family, things have been bad for a very long time. Real wages for 80% of Americans' workers, for example, have not gone up more than a trivial amount for the last 3 decades. At the same time, income for the top 1% has jumped from nearly 10% of all income to roughly 20% of all income. Put another way, virtually all of the gains of the entire economic system have gone to the tiny, tiny group at the top for at least 3 decades. Worth pausing to think about that one. What's going on when virtually all the gains for the entire economic system go to the top? I'm not interested here in criticizing those at the top. The question is, we can do that later, the question is, what is going on with the system when this kind of thing happens and continues to happen in an ongoing way, year after year, decade after decade? Another reminder, almost 50 million Americans live in officially defined poverty. The rate is higher, not lower, than in the late 1960s, another disturbing trend marker. Moreover, if we use the measuring standard common throughout the advanced world, which considers the poverty level to be half the median income level, the number would be just under 70 million, and the rate would be almost 23% of all Americans living in poverty. That is to say nothing of steady increases in global warming and an unemployment rate that, if properly measured, is stuck in the range of roughly 15%. At the most superficial level, Washington, as the saying goes, is broken. Give or take an occasional gain in selected areas, the political system is simply incapable of dealing with the deeper challenges. It focuses on deficits, not answers. Long trends that don't change are a clear signal that it's not simply the modern period of partisan bickering and congressional stalemate that is causing the problems. The trends are moving steadily downward. We're moving steadily downward long before the Tea Party and the recent partisan foolishness, long before the Citizens United Supreme Court decision allowed corporations to put big money directly into politics, and long before many events that have heralded as tipping points one kind or another. Nor are people stupid. More and more have a sense that something different is going on, both with the economy and more fundamentally with democracy itself. A few more bits of information just as reminders again of something that we're all beginning to see. A mid-2011 poll found that roughly 80% of Americans believe their congressional representatives to be, quote, more interested in serving the needs of special interest groups than the people they represent, end quote. Another poll found that almost 4 out of 5 believe a few rich people in corporations have far too much power. And only 37% of Americans, much more than a third of the population, have confidence in the most solemn and august of American institutions, the Supreme Court. I'm going to dig much, much deeper into all of this, of course, but for now, let's leave it at this. When critical, long trends do not improve, when they steadily get worse year in and year out, it is clear that we face deeply rooted systemic problems, not simply political problems in the usual sense of the term. Moreover, as these polls suggest, people increasingly understand that something is really wrong. The question is, how do we deal with a systemic crisis, something built into the way the political economy works, rather than just a simple political or economic crisis? Garo Pavlovitz, what then must we do?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back to the third hour of our program. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Jeff Cohen, the founder of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, FAIR, the co-founder of RootsAction.org. He's also the founding director of the Park Center for Independent Media at Ithaca College, where he is an associate professor of journalism. His most recent book, Cable News Confidential, My Misadventures in Corporate Media. He was the senior producer at MSNBC's Phil Donahue program. JeffCohen.org is his website, and you can tweet him at JeffCOT. Jeff, welcome back to the program. This thing that you guys are doing with Roots Action to vote Trump out along with some of the leading progressives in the country. And I totally endorse this, including, friends of mine like Medea Benjamin, Noam Chomsky, we talked to on this program day before yesterday, Marjorie Cohn, Roseanne DeMoro, Barbara Ehrenreich, Daniel Ellsberg, I've been corresponding with recently. He just wrote a blurb for my next book. Congressman Kana, who's on this show all the time, Bill McKibben, who we know, James Zogby, regular on this show, people who have historically supported Bernie Sanders, in some cases even Jill Stein, getting together. Tell us about this, Jeff. Welcome back to the program, by the way.
It's great to be with you, Tom. Yeah, it's an exciting campaign. It's aimed at people who live in swing states who are not that in love with Biden. And so we've got all these progressive luminaries. We're going to use social media. We've got staff in several states, and we're going to try to convince thoroughly progressive voters, what we call swing voters on the left. These are voters who are thinking about either voting for Biden or not voting, or voting third-party protest vote, and we're encouraging them to vote for Biden. The slogan of our campaign is vote Trump out, then challenge Biden from day one. And that's why we have all these progressive luminaries, that if you look at the swing states like Michigan and Wisconsin, the mere increase in Jill Stein's Green Party vote from 2012 to 2016, that increase was greater than Trump's margin of victory when he defeated Hillary Clinton. So we're talking to progressive voters who do not love Biden or his record or his history, and we're telling them this election isn't about Biden. It's about getting Trump out. If people want to see the new Noam Chomsky video where he makes that argument, our website is simply votetrumpout.org. If you've got activists, I know you do, Tom, in your audience who use Twitter, it's hashtag #VoteTrumpOut, and I'm told we're trending this afternoon. But like Noam Chomsky, I know he was just on your show. He lives in Arizona, so he gave us this video, and he gave us this quote: "I live in the swing state of Arizona. I would vote for a lamppost to get Trump out." And that's what we're trying to convey to young Bernie supporters who do not love Biden. They may not love his vice presidential choice. I'm sure I won't. I do not love Biden. We campaigned against Biden. Norman Solomon and I are the two co-founders of Roots Action. We're both elected Bernie delegates. It's not about Biden. It's about getting Trump out and empowering the ascendant progressive movement. You have Ro Khanna on your show all the time. It empowers Ro Khanna to have a Joe Biden in the White House to push against rather than a Trump who's absolutely immune to progressive persuasion or protest. And Cori Bush, just elected, how exciting, in St. Louis and Ferguson, Missouri. Rashida Tlaib, just reelected in Michigan. The squad is growing. The progressive movement is ascending. And the only thing that would stop our ascension is if Trump is reelected for 4 years.
Yeah, this is one of those very, very straightforward things that I think some people miss is that I mean, like I voted for Ralph Nader in 2000, but I lived in Vermont, and that upset my wife, Louise. She was like, "Oh, wait a minute, we got to vote for Al Gore. I mean, it's George Bush is a toxic guy. He's a warmonger. He's already told us he's going to start a war with Iraq if he gets elected." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I like Ralph." We don't have that luxury. At least those of us who, and I don't live in a swing state. I don't think, I live in Oregon, but if I lived in a swing state. I mean, that was my argument when I lived in Vermont in 2000 was it's not a swing state, so I have the luxury of doing this. But that nuance is lost on a lot of people who live in swing states, may not even realize that their state is a swing state. Right. And the map is changing this year.
Yeah, if anyone goes to our website, they'll see we are not preaching to you who live in Vermont or California that you have to go out and vote for Biden and organize around Biden. In certain states, Biden's going to win by 20, 25 points. But there's 10 places we're focusing on, 10 states. Trump won them all. They're now swing states. If Biden can flip a few of them, then Trump will be ejected from the White House. These swing states are Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wisconsin, plus 2 oddballs. Maine and Nebraska allow electoral college votes to be split up. And last time, Trump won the northern part of Maine, and he won all of the districts in Nebraska. But Nebraska, too, is a swing district. It's around Omaha. If you live in Nebraska, too, you do not have the luxury, in my opinion, to vote third-party protest or to not bother voting because you don't like Biden. The same thing with Maine Congressional District 2. That's the northern 80% of the state. So we know where the battleground is going to be. We don't want to just defeat Trump in these swing states. We want to bury him. And then if you're a real progressive who's on the fence, I don't like Biden, I like what the Green Party stands for. If you live in these states, you really need to vote Trump out, and your only tool for doing that is to vote for Biden in those states.
Right. And then, looking forward, we're talking with Jeff Cohen. VoteTrumpOut.org is the new website. Talk a little bit about how, if, God willing, Joe Biden becomes our president, how do we as progressives, having helped put him into office, then start pushing him in progressive directions?
Right. Well, that's the key. He knows we will have put him into office. Hillary may not realize it, but if she hadn't lost those votes to Jill Stein in Michigan, Wisconsin, I think Biden realizes he needs the Bernie people, he needs the progressive people. So where will we be on day one? We're going to be demanding that they push toward Medicare for all. We're going to be demanding something like a Green New Deal. We're going to be demanding cut the military budget. That's where all the money goes in the discretionary budget. We need to redirect that to human needs and redirect it to environmental needs. And then, of course, tax the wealthy. These are winnable things. The left is ascendant. The squad is going to be bigger than ever. And there are so many progressives knowing that the grassroots, most of the people in the Democratic Party overwhelmingly are for Medicare for all. Every exit poll has shown it. Even if they voted for Biden, they came out and said they were for Medicare for all to pollsters. So Biden knows where the base of the party is. Biden knows where the ascendancy is in the party. And beginning on day one in January of next year is when our movement is organized as ever, and we are better organized than ever. We're going to be pushing on the corporate Democrats to say this is what the base wants, this is what the country wants, this is what the polls show even some Republicans and most independents want, and that's how we push on them, Tom. And I should give out the Twitter. It's hashtag #VoteTrumpOut. It's that simple.
Right, and VoteTrumpOut.org is the website, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, Jeff Cohen, VoteTrumpOut.org. Jeff, feel free to put my name on anything you're doing.
Yes, we will. We'll get a quote from you. All right.
Okay, and thanks so much for the great service you're doing for our country. Jeff Cohen. We'll be right back with more of your calls in the news of the day in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 15 minutes past the hour. Got a fascinating story here about Michelle Obama. I'll tell you about that after. And welcome back. Johan in Los Angeles, California. Hey, Johan, what's up?
You have to watch out for gerrymandering. Of course, the border suppression is in the works from Trump by closing down the post office and privatize it through its donor, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I know the Trump, won Florida in 2016 through gerrymandering. I forgot the video of it, but all the Democrats and former Republicans who want Trump out has to watch out for this. We cannot be blindsided again if we want to really secure the win.
Yeah, gerrymandering is a very pernicious thing, and it's the reason why a majority of people in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in North Carolina, in Wisconsin voted for Democrats for Congress as well as for governors. And you got Democratic governors because they were statewide votes, but the legislatures of those states and the congressional delegations of those states are still dominated by Republicans. And it's because of gerrymandering, exactly what you pointed out, Johan. And, a good point and well made. Thank you very much for the call. Ken, in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Excuse me. Hey, Ken, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. The big problem that we have in this country is the fact that so many people are willing to believe in GOP propaganda and oligarch propaganda, and then to turn around and vote for the Republicans. It's very disgusting and nauseating. And even Marx and Engels in their day, they had the same problem. And in one letter to a correspondent, Engels wrote, "Durchschaden klug machen," and which roughly translates into adversity will make us smart. And but I think that the only thing that's really going to spark some real intelligence gathering on the part of our electorate is when the robots march in and really start taking over and making the working class redundant.
Yeah, well, that's been going on for some time, Ken. But yes, there's this massive confluence of events going on right now that Americans. I mean, it's a maelstrom. It's a tornado. You see, if you think back to the Wizard of Oz, all the debris is flying in a million directions, and it's the maelstrom of our jobs having been outsourced all over the world. And that started with the Reagan administration and Reagan and Bush negotiating NAFTA and then permanent normal trade relations with China, and has gone on for 40 years. It's the destruction of our environment and climate change. I got the New York Times environmental newsletter today, and it's just absolutely shocking. They're talking about FEMA and all the crises that are climate change related that FEMA's having to deal with right this minute in real time. Climate change is already affecting America in very large ways. And then we've got, this right-wing media infrastructure and a larger right-wing intellectual infrastructure, the think tanks, working to change the narrative in America. And then you've got the political crisis of the Republican Party going full fascist. And it's all happening at once, and people are looking around going, whoa. And, all the more reason that we all need to get involved. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a minute. The Hartmann Report is a free daily podcast 7 days a week, and you can find our entire 3-hour podcast over at thomhartmann.com. So we've got a new video up for regular supporters of our program over at thomhartmann.com, and this is about just a totally bizarre story about these 3 guys with no VA experience, not even veterans, who are all big shots down at Mar-a-Lago, that Donald Trump has put in charge of the Veterans Administration functionally. And their association, one of them is the head of Marvel Entertainment, their association with Johnson & Johnson and the New York Stock Exchange, and Johnson & Johnson, the big drug company, taking this very, very cheap chemical ketamine, tweaking the molecule a little bit, and rolling it out as a new anti-suicide drug, Spravato, that in clinical trials caused 6 people to die, 3 of them by suicide, and none of the people taking the placebo to die. And now Trump is telling the VA, you have to buy this highly inflated price drug from Johnson & Johnson. And the Democrats want to know what's up with the VA crowd guys. Check it out. It's at thomhartmann.com. So Michelle Obama, this is fascinating. She has a podcast, and her new podcast came out this morning. And in her podcast, she said that she is, quote, dealing with some form of low-grade depression. It's interesting, Louise and I talk about this frequently, how we're, our moods and our, just the whole sense of, what's going on. Reality has shifted. We haven't We haven't been able to hug anybody other than each other since March 10th. And, it's life-changing, and it's sinking into a lot of people. There was a fascinating piece, I believe it was in the New York Times this morning, about how reports of depression and anxiety disorders are going through the roof right now. Because people are, first of all, there's a disease out there that has the capacity to kill you or your children or your parents. And it's invisible, and you've got a president who seems, hell-bent for leather on trying to infect as many Americans as possible. That produces anxiety. You've got 25 million people who don't have jobs right now, and the Republicans are dithering about whether or not, if another Republican went on TV this morning and said, oh, $600 a week, that's too much money. We can't give people that much money. They won't go to work. Well, they're looking for work anyway. They would much rather have work. But, you combine all this stuff, and then this is what Michelle Obama said. She said, I don't think I'm unusual in that. But I'd be remiss to say that part of this depression is also the result, and this is where it goes way beyond the two things that I just pointed out, hiding out from a disease and having lost your source of income. Back to Michelle Obama, she says, I'd be remiss to say that part of this depression is also the result of what we're seeing in terms of the protests, the continued racial unrest that has plagued this country since its birth. I have to say that waking up to the news, waking up to how this administration has or has not responded, waking up to yet another story of a black man or a black person somehow being dehumanized or hurt or killed or falsely accused of something, it is exhausting. And it has led to a weight that I haven't felt in my life in a long while. She continued, she said, I'm waking up in the middle of the night because I'm worrying about something. There's this heaviness. I try to make sure I get a workout in, although there have been periods throughout this quarantine where I've just felt too low. I've gone through those emotional highs and lows, and I think everybody feels, where you just don't feel yourself. And sometimes there's been a week or so where I had to surrender to that and just not be hard on myself. And say, you know what? You're just not feeling that treadmill right now. And then she goes on to say, I reach out to my family and to my friends, even at this time of quarantine. I fought to continue to find a way to stay connected to the people in my life who bring me joy. And my girlfriends, my husband, my kids, it's the small things. Louise and I started back in March, I think. Maybe it was early April. Doing a Zoom meeting every weekend. There's a particular time on a particular weekend day when I send a Zoom link out to our kids and to my three brothers and to my nephews and nieces and cousins, and it's just basically it just goes out to everybody that's related to us directly, kind of first and second order relatives, and inviting them to the Zoom meeting. And I've had people drop in from all over the country. And sometimes, we just have a few people. Sometimes we have a large group, but it's like, staying in touch. It's so important. Louise and I have gotten in the habit of reminding each other, asking each other, what are you grateful for today? I think gratitude is probably the single most powerful therapeutic element that anybody can bring into their lives. And the one that goes along with that, of course, is forgiveness. But right at this moment, I think that gratitude is the one we really need to be focusing on. Even if, I don't want to try and put, what's the old phrase, lipstick on a pig. Or make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Probably a little less sexist metaphor. But being with each other, reaching out to each other and to our friends and to our neighbor. One of my very best friends, he lives on the other side of the country. His wife is dying of cancer right now. And, I'm trying to reach out to him every day or every other day at the very worst. And, we talk on the phone regularly, and he's just going through hell between his wife literally, dying of cancer in front of him and, being locked up, essentially. This is just a really tough time. And we all need to be figuring out ways to reach out to other people, to remind ourselves what matters. We're seeing problems associated with mental illness exploding in the United States, and it makes perfect sense. It's totally understandable. And then you've got Donald Trump, whose solution to these kind of things is, send in federal forces and let's have a riot so that he can get reelected, which just adds to the, oh my God, what's going on here? So anyway, I just, we don't need to talk about it, but I just wanted to point that out. We are...
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
If you're feeling like it's a tough time, you're not alone. And we all need to be here for each other. We'll be back.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sanyika Shakur. This is a book that was written back in the late 90s, but it's still very, very timely. This is from the second chapter titled Class Antagonisms Inside the Fundamental Contradiction of National Oppression. Having just passed the 19th and quickly approaching the 20th anniversary of the LA Rebellion, we should be reminded here of what Rodney King whimpered as he stood in front of a bank of microphones surrounded by class enemies and neo-colonial politicians. We should remember how he'd been dressed in that non-threatening cardigan sweater, white shirt, and black tie, how his hair had been tortured into submission by a jerry curl. We should reflect as well upon how timid and spooked he looked, and on how concerned and stern those who flanked him were as well. That was a Kodak moment. It was staged to foster an image of contrition and resignation, submission, a victim. Rodney King had been led to believe, through a bourgeois sense of reasoning, that the rebellion was really about him, that the reason new Africans and Mexicanos took to the streets of South Central was the result of his filmed beating. That, of course, is typical of mechanical bourgeois thinking. What it's not typical of, however, is someone from the hood. And this cuts both ways. No one in the hoods and barrios ever thought it was about Rodney King. We'd all seen the film over and over like everyone else, but that was par for the course. We'd always seen that, long before anybody caught it on tape. Actually, we'd experienced much more than that. Why, it's safe to say that the hoods had gone to war with each other in vicious waves of internal, intra-class combat for much less than that, though because of a general colonial mentality which prevents the challenging of bottom-up oppression, the same hood forces will not, in any systemic way, wage war on the pigs, or for freedom, land, and socialism. Rodney King alone, and of his own accord, would not have thought to hold a press conference to ask the asinine question in the form of a whimpering request, can't we just all get along? The fact of the matter is, we are getting along. New Africans and Mexicanos are getting along just fine. What we couldn't understand was why he was admonishing us for getting at the exploiters of our communities. The impression he gave, with his handler's hands up his back like a ventriloquist troll, was that a race riot was going on, as if we had all begun to kill each other or burn and rob each other's homes. His handlers compelled him to send up a false flag, a diversion. But you see, this was the very thing that exposed the class interests and reactionary politics of the Uncle Toms that had been designated to handle him, and by extension, us. Let's go back for a minute. Let's talk social development, aka history. There exists a fundamental contradiction in our lives that, like an elephant in the room, no one wants to acknowledge. As a consequence of the war waged upon various African nations by European powers, those of us captured and kidnapped were taken out of our own self-determining social developments and violently forced into Euro-American history. This is not simply a clever play on words. This is a reality. We lost the ability to control our own destiny. Read that again. From that time until now, the fundamental basic contradiction between the U.S. oppressor nation and our own oppressed and colonized nation has been the governing imperialist relationship, which is to say, us not being in control of the qualitative factors that determine our lives as a people, as a nation. Our tradition of struggle against this fundamental contradiction has taken many forms, some hidden or obscured, some open and hostile. But all of these have been open to resolve the fundamental contradiction and to regain our independence. While there have been some bona fide struggles to resolve the contradiction, there have also been reactionary neocolonial struggles waged by internal enemies loyal to the oppressor nation and culture that have tried time and time again to subvert and control our destiny for the benefit of the capitalists. They've come among us, always imposed from above, stirring up emotions and giving lip service to progress, equality, justice, and prosperity. These always within the colonial confines of the oppressor's arrangements, and none collectively ever materialize, because without a resolution of the fundamental contradiction, that is the freeing of our productive forces from U.S. imperialism and the governing of our own affairs, we'll remain a minority within the American system as opposed to a majority in our own, and subjected to the established bourgeois social contract, i.e. colonialism, neo and post. We can parade all through the empire with black congressmen, black mayors, black governors, black police chiefs, black Supreme Court justices, hell, even a black president. And absolutely nothing will alter the genocidal relationship that governs our national oppression here, because the blacks are part of the colonial apparatus. They have made a strategic alliance with the capitalist imperialists to act as go-betweens in our oppression and exploitation. This is a conscious class stand. The black petty bourgeois is not innocently confused, like, say, Mrs. Jackson across the street is, about our national oppression, about the existence and subjugation of New Africa. They are well-read, have traveled in our experience. They've just chosen sides against us and in favor of our historical enemies. And the sooner we recognize and internalize this, the better off we'll be. Black ain't nothing but a color. As a designation of our national identity, it has played out. It is a superficial understanding at best and a foolish and dangerous analysis at worst. We have no collective control over the qualitative factors which determine our lives. We do not, in other words, control our destiny, not as a people or a state. The book is Stand Up, Struggle Forward by Sandika Shakur.
In this week's Science Revolution, will a virus stop the Trump cult the way defeat in World War II stopped the fascist cult? Dr. Michael Mann is with us on how the Trump administration boosts deregulation by undervaluing the impacts of climate change. Tony Corvo drops by about a new rule. Americans are now eating chickens with cancer. Ew, is that healthy? He'll let you know. Jenny Harbine tells us about a new lawsuit to stop Trump from handing public land to coal companies. Plus, geeky science. School openings? Well, studies now show young kids could spread COVID-19 as easily as older children and adults. Tune into the Science Revolution wherever fine podcasts are available. In our special video for supporters of our program, people who sign up over at ThomHartmann.com, this week it's the story of what the rich libertarian billionaires who have been funding the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party for, well, in a big way since the election of Ronald Reagan for the last 40 years, and have succeeded by owning politicians and owning the Republican Party in preventing us from even getting a public option, much less a national health care system. What they are doing, what their answer is, what their response is to the question, what do we do when things really go bad? When the economy's falling apart, when epidemic disease is sweeping the country, what do we do? Well, it turns out they've got an answer. It's just not an answer for all the rest of us. They're getting in their private jets and heading off to their private little bunkers. Seriously, that's what they're up to. So I lay out the whole story, complete with details and names, over at ThomHartmann.com. Check it out. Thanks so much. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tom in Jerusalem, Israel. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Yeah, hey, how you doing? Your Shalom. The book that you have on Putin looks extremely interesting, but I think the only caveat I would have is I think people on the left need to be very, very careful about red baiting, because basically we created our own enemy. Ever since the treaties that ended the Cold War with the Russians, they were told none of the NATO troops are going to come to the Russian borders. Well, guess what? They're there. And I think this is a trap that the left can fall into a lot of times. Anyway, if you could comment on that. I know you got a lot of callers, and I appreciate your program.
No, my thoughts on that are very explicit. It is true that when the wall came down, George Herbert Walker Bush, as I recall, was president, or around that time, was negotiating this with correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm remembering this wrong, with, what's his name? The guy with the birthmark on his forehead. Anyhow, they were negotiating that, and, Gorbachev, and basically the message was, we will not put NATO troops on Russia's border, and we've had a couple of administrations that have been basically going back on that. On the one hand, on the other hand, when the Soviet Union vanished and Russia became Russia, with the enthusiastic support of people from both parties in the United States, the Chicago boys, the Milton Friedman bunch, went over to Russia and said, we will show you how to convert a communist economy into a capitalist economy. And basically they did laissez-faire on steroids, which is guaranteed to produce not a functioning democratic republic, but instead an oligarchy, which is what Russia became as a consequence of that. So, and now you've got Russia behaving at times in ways that are promotive, shall we say, of oligarchy as opposed to democracy, and that has brought Russia, or at least Putin's government, into some conflict with the United States, particularly during the Obama administration. And personally, I would love to see both the United States and Russia pull back from the edge of oligarchy. Russia has stepped over that already. The United States is right on that line, right on the edge of it. And it seems to me that the problem isn't so much anymore red baiting or anything like that, but the very real political and economic and social problems of massive inequality, income and wealth inequality, that come about as the result of an oligarchic or kleptocratic form of government. And we have to keep in mind, Russia has the second largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world. They are not insignificant. They have a much smaller economy than the United States. Their economy is smaller than California, but they are a major military force and a major force in the world, and a major, technical force, internet force, and things like that. And I think just sloganeering this thing and villainizing people, I don't think is a good idea. Tom, spot on. Thank you very much for the call. Ed in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, quick comment about the lack of contact tracing here in Florida, and I'll take your condolences for living here. But my son had his 16th birthday 10 days ago. We didn't have a party or anything, but he saw one of his friends out on the street in our neighborhood, talked for a little bit. They didn't have their masks. It was unplanned. The kid gave him like a little slap, happy birthday. We found out yesterday the kid's positive for COVID. Now, in a real country, okay, we would have been notified, right, by contact tracers. By the way, your son's been in contact with somebody else, has the virus. We have heard nothing. Zero. Okay? Jeez. And now he's all upset. Should he go get the test? I'm saying now it's 10 days out. I'm a doctor. I said we're probably in the safe zone by now. But this is a horrible way to be running this pandemic. And and I know why, right?
Yeah. Well, let's speculate about why. I mean, it seems to me, Ed, after watching Trump yesterday, or I guess it was this morning on Fox News, where he was talking, he was on Fox and Friends, and he literally said this morning, this is just going to go away, like all things do. Right. And I have to believe at this point that he actually believes that. He thinks this is going to be like, well, the flu of 1918, by 1920, it was gone, right? The world had herd immunity and it moved on. And the coronavirus is going to do the same thing. And there's absolutely no evidence for that. And so we've got a guy in the White House who's living in a world of magical thinking. And then he's being pushed really hard by groups like FreedomWorks, that brought us the Tea Party, this Coke invention, from the Koch brothers. FreedomWorks, I'm getting emails from them 2-3 times a week saying, it's time to open the economy. It's time to open our schools. We got to put people back to work because the billionaires need the income. It's like, wow, it's the perfect storm, Ed. As a physician, how does it appear to you?
I got this theory. After you saw him flipping around those charts with Jonathan Swan the other day, I'm sort of convinced that he's not even given the right information. They're feeding him stuff to keep him happy.
I think that's true. And I think that they do it because they know if they don't do it, they get fired and replaced by somebody who will. And, he went through that cycle so many times with all his chiefs of staff that he finally found a chief of staff in Mark Meadows. Again, a guy who's owes his political career to money from the Koch brothers and their friends, who is just an absolute toady. He takes the money and he does what he's told. And what he's being told by Trump is don't give me bad news. So he doesn't give him bad news.
Well, listen, thanks for listening to me, and pray for us in Florida, because I saw him last night. He was telling how great Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott were, and I'm a registered Republican only so I can vote against them in the primaries. I'm an undercover Democrat. Okay.
Good on you, Ed. All right, thanks a lot for the call.
God bless you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Back at you, Ed. Jan in St. Louis, Missouri. Hey, Jan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I listen to Republican stations once in a while just to see what they're up to. And a couple weeks ago, they were talking about how the Christian evangelical megachurches are doing a nationwide get out the vote for Trump. I haven't heard the Democrats doing anything like that. It seems like they could do that with a lot of Democratic-leaning churches, such as the black churches and any other church that would be swayed towards Biden. So I'm wondering why they haven't thought of doing that if they're trying to get...
Because they are respecting the rule of law. The law says that if you as a church engage in any sort of partisan political activity, you lose your tax-exempt status. And so the progressive churches, the black churches, by and large, have not politicked. They will, they'll do things like get out the vote or souls to the polls, things like that. But those are not overtly partisan. The right-wing churches, the white evangelical churches, are openly embracing the Republican Party, since the Republican Party has said, we're going to go all in on abortion and eliminating the rights of women to not only have an abortion, but even get birth control. That has energized and activated the hard right, white supremacist Christian evangelical movement. And they don't care about the law. In fact, Donald Trump told them to go ahead and break the law. George W. Bush told them to go ahead and break the law. And they did. They've been doing this since the early 2000s. So that's what's going on, Jan. I just have to think, though, that people who really truly, are Christians. I don't know how to say this other than this, or steeped in the true teachings, the core teachings of any of the world's major religions, would have to look at what's going on in the Republican Party and certainly in the Trump administration, if nothing else, and say this is not consistent with any of the values practiced or at least preached by the founders of these religions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, well, heaven help us all if more people don't open their eyes to all the foolishness that he's up to, because if he doesn't get out of office, I don't know, I'm just going to have to move to Canada if they'll still accept Americans. I don't know. I just
they're not accepting Americans anymore, Jan. Unfortunately, we've got to take our country back. Jan, thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to us on Sirius XM. We'll be right back. It's 45 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program, taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Phil in Skull Valley, Arizona. Hey, Phil, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I want to hear your thoughts on, well, you asked what we might add to your list of things to help restore the republic. Monetary and financial systems. What are your thoughts on how out of control they are, how we can rein them in? That's it.
Yeah. Well, gold is pushing $2,000 an ounce right now, and there is speculation. The Axios newsletter I got this morning was talking about, people are talking about $3,000 an ounce gold. And what people have to keep in mind is that when the price of gold goes up, it doesn't mean that gold got more valuable. It means that the dollar got less valuable. Gold is functionally the international currency, and against which other currencies are measured. And a lot of people are putting their money in gold. They're putting it into euros. They're putting it into Australian dollars or Canadian dollars, because the Fed has been printing money like there's no tomorrow. The Fed has $7 trillion on their balance sheet just from the last 6 months, where they're buying corporate bonds and they're buying corporate stock in order to support the stock market. This is stuff that is beyond the Fed's legal ability to do. This is illegal, what Jerome Powell is doing. But, Donald Trump put him in that office and then harassed the bejesus out of him. And then on top of that, you've got, Jerome Powell's inclinations to begin with. The guy is not an economist. He's the first, I think he's the first Fed chief we've had in my lifetime who's not an economist. He's a bankster. He used to be an investment banker. And so, gee, what a surprise. The Fed is printing money and giving it to bankers. With Jerome Powell at the head of it. And what I think this is going to produce, he's doing everything he can to hold the economy together and the stock market together until November 3rd. And on November 4th, particularly, or whenever the election is ultimately decided, it'll probably be a week or two with mail-in ballots. But, when the election is decided, I think Powell is going to step back and say, okay, that's it. We're just going to let the currency float. We're not going to print any more money. We're not going to support the stock market anymore. And the bottom is going to fall out of the market. You're going to see a market going to 5 or at the worst, and 10, probably 10,000 at the best, on the Dow. And the narrative that the Republicans and the right-wing media are going to manufacture is Americans elected a Democrat, and therefore the business community, which knows best, they understand economics, the business community has decided to run for the hills, to head for the hills, because the Democrat is coming, increased taxes are coming, and all that kind of stuff. Get ready for that narrative, because that's what's going to be going on. But in the meantime, what's going to follow that is a couple of years of really severe inflation. We're going to be back to Jimmy Carter style inflation, which came about as a result of Jerry Ford's policies. The inflation follows the action by typically 2 to 5 years. So I think the Biden administration is going to have some really big challenges to deal with, and I hope. I pray to God that they are up to the task, because this is going to be huge. This is going to be ugly. And I agree with you. We have to restore, fiscal sanity. And I'm not talking about balancing the budget, although, there's nothing wrong with trying to balance the budget. But right now, the priority is, getting Americans safe. Number one, safety. The bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Safety. It's the foundation of everything. Phil, thank you for the call. You brought up a really important point. And it was worth the deep dive into it. We'll be right back. The hidden history of the Supreme Court tells the story of Nixon and Reagan's committing treason to steal the White House. So we've got a new video over at ThomHartmann.com for people who support our program. It's about private equity firms. Mitt Romney's company, Bain Capital, and Steve Schwarzman's Blackstone, and some of these private equity groups have long been considered risky investments. I mean, billionaires put money into these things. But and sometimes they produce really high returns, but they also have huge fees, and they operate kind of like a black box. There's all kinds of hidden stuff. And what they have been salivating about for years, Schwarzman talked about this just a few days after Donald Trump was inaugurated, was they wanted to get their hands on people's 401ks and IRAs, people's retirement money, their pension funds. And it's been illegal. And Trump and Eugene Scalia, the head of the Labor Department, just legalized this practice. The consequences could be dramatic. The video's over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, picking up your phone calls. And let's see here, Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Just thinking back on what you were discussing about the right-wing evangelicals. The progressives, if they were to engage in some kind of talk, I don't think it would be politicking. What they would be doing is defending the Christian religion, telling it like it is. I mean, Jesus himself, and I know we had this discussion before, spoke of being on guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is today's right-wingers, the Trumpers, the right-wing evangelicals. They're going to keep lying. They're going to keep inciting hate and not follow the Christian religion of love. It's not politicking. It's just a matter of calling it like it is, because believe it or not, there are some atheists, and I'm a Catholic. I'm watching and very observant. There's some atheists that are more Christian than some of those who profess to be Christian. So we need to set the record straight as to what the Christian religion is. Yeah, it's coincidental, or it's coincidental to the election year, but that's, again, these right-wingers need to be called out for their lies and they're misusing or hijacking the religion. And I'm one that's defending it.
There you go, Michael. And I think that there are some people waking up to this. Jerry Falwell Jr., who, what a bizarre guy, who went through all this stuff with his pool boy. A couple of days ago, or over the weekend, tweeted out a picture from his yacht, apparently, with an attractive young woman, very scantily clad, with his arm around her, and both of them having their pants unzipped and their shirts pulled up over their stomachs. And he's holding a glass, and the line underneath. It wasn't Twitter, it was Instagram or Snapchat. It was one of those that he put it up. And the line that he wrote was, words to the effect of, the brown liquid in that glass is just water, or something like that. He was obviously drinking and flirting and was bragging about it. He deleted the post, after an hour or so, apparently. But now you've got students at Liberty University, and a lot of these Christian schools, whether they're Christian colleges or Christian private schools, grew out of the movement in the 1950s after the Brown v. Board case in 1954, where schools were forced to integrate, and white evangelicals said, hell no, my kids are not going to go to school with a person of color. No way. And so they started all these schools. And so you've got these Christian evangelicals in Liberty University, and they're looking at Jerry Falwell's behavior going, what? And I think that there's, this slow dawning. Jeff Charlotte with, his book on the family, which has now been made into a 4 or 5 part series on Netflix called The Family, and it's really worth watching. It's mind-boggling. The word is getting out there, Michael, that these guys are not, I was going to say they're not Christians. They're not people that Jesus would recognize, if he were to return to earth.
You're right.
So,
they're not Christian. If they can't follow the teachings of Christ, if they can't be a peace and true love and respect the rights of others, I'll say a few, they are not Christians.
Yeah, I'm with you. Michael, thank you for the call. Doris in Westland, Michigan. Hey, Doris, what's up?
Oh, I want to tell you, Detroit did drive-through voting at 2 different polls yesterday in the primary, and that was very successful. And they're
you
thinking
had drive-through voting?
Right. And I kind of came in on the tail end, so I don't know all the details. But they're trying to do it for real on the real election, and I would think if you would talk it up, Democratic mayors might pick it up and do that and avoid.
So how did this work, Doris? You drive up in your car to a voting machine? Is that how it worked?
No, you drive up. Someone checks you off. Someone brings out a ballot. I don't know if it was an abstain ballot or what, but anyway, you vote. And there were 5 women in the car. They voted. Then they have to go in and turn in the ballot, and then they drive off. So, which would take care of the problems with COVID-19 and being tired and all the other rigmarole.
Right. So you didn't have to go in the building. They were standing outside to collect the ballots?
No, I think they had to go in the building and drop off the ballots. Now, in Westland, we have a drive-in box, outdoors. You drive up and drop your ballot, absentee ballot in that box.
Right.
So you don't even have to get out of your car after you vote. And it takes care of the mail problem. So those are two things that Democratic mayors could get on to.
I absolutely agree. Doris, thank you. Thanks for sharing that with us, and great to hear from you from Westland, where Louise and I used to live when she was pregnant with our first child. I think I've told that story before, though, so I'll stop right now. Anyhow, thanks so much for being with us today. Like I was saying earlier, go out of your way to be there for the people around you, even if they're not physically in your area. We all need to be working on this. Our country needs some healing. We can all be healing agents. And then also, of course, share your outrage with 155,000 dead Americans, all at the hands of Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. Get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Raycon Earbuds. Stay at home with better sound. More info at buyraycon.com/Tom. Omega XL, which according to clinical research helps joints. More info at omegaxl.com/Tom. CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. The Clean Phone Pro, phone sanitizer and charger. More info at thenewdealshop.com. Keeps hair loss treatment. More info at keeps.com/Tom. And Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Health. For more info, teeth.com, code TOM.
We say fight back!